This is my monthly compendium for the month of June 2023. Enjoy. Case file number 1134, written by Exterminator 267, the Seagull that refused physics. When I was a kid, my cousin and I went island hopping in Maine. We still do. Well, one day, we were walking around this small island we beached the boat at. It was a quiet day, no breeze whatsoever out in the middle of the water. This island had no trees either, so nothing was blocking a breeze. There simply was none. All of a sudden, we heard squawking. Manic squawking. There were two seagulls, one flapping its wings and flying circles around the other. The other, you ask, was standing, wings folded at rest, about 75 feet in the air, completely still. As soon as I shouted for my cousin, the still bird dropped out of the sky, and we heard an audible crack as its head and neck broke, blood decorating the rocks. The flying seagull landed next to his or her fallen. I had never felt so sad and confused in all my life. There is no possible way, in the laws of physics that we know, that would allow for that bird to remain motionless 75 feet in the air with its wings folded. Case file number 1135, written by 4RS Mitt. My Vanishing Savior. This has been nagging me for decades. When I was 7, I went skiing with my younger brother. It had snowed. There was a suitable hill nearby. I remember the wooden skis, etc. After some time, I had to pee. There were a lot of kids about, and adults too, out strolling for their Sunday afternoon walk. Germans did do that. So no ducking in the bushes, and all the winter gear I had on was in the way, so I had to go home. A shortcut, think hypotenuse of a right triangle, across the field was the quickest way, except for the deep ditch where it intersected with the road. I tried stepping up the ditch and kept sliding back down. My skis didn't have good edges. I started crying, being frustrated and having to pee. I didn't even think of taking the skis off. Suddenly, I get lifted out of the ditch, set on the snowy road, and I can still see the worsted wool overcoat and sleeve of the man that did that. I can even smell the damp wool, as I was held against him during the lift. I wiped my nose and eyes, collected my poles, and turned to thank my savior, and he's gone. There are people, but nobody wears a coat like that. No tall men. Not one way, not the other. I had a clear view for a minimum of 100 meters, 330 feet, either way, and the guy was not running. And I was polite, so I didn't wait long to say thank you. I have been back there many times, and even measured out the distance on Google Maps. There is simply no way I could have not seen the person who lifted me out of the ditch. I have literally spent time timing people walking there. It takes most minutes to walk that corner, yet my rescuer was gone in a few seconds. Bonus file, written by Alex Ruzio, The Dark Side of Steel. I lived in a dead steel town. Buildings were put up somewhat haphazardly. If you imagine your typical suburban block, imagine instead of a backyard, you had another house or two. It was kinda cramped. My mom, grandma, brothers, and I lived in the 2-story duplex at the front of the property. It's more or less a traditional house, unlike the building on the back of the property. That one was 3 stories tall, and is basically a large above-ground basement and shed with 2 stories of apartments on top. The buildings were maybe 15 feet apart from one another. Anyways, my uncle rented the middle apartment for a few years, sold substances from it, got addicted, fell out of a stable relationship into one with another addict, went from being reasonably well off to losing the grip on his life. He ended up moving in with us after the city had to cut off water to the back for some infrastructure issue, and my grandma had them cut the power as well. My mom, bros, and I moved out shortly after she married, but he returned a couple years later after it fell apart. About 2 months into living there again, I'm up late and I smell a bit of smoke, which is normal. My uncle was always up late, usually high, doing something in the kitchen. Turns out this time, he passed out with grease on the stove. We didn't know that at the time, but as soon as I got up to check on the smell, my grandma screamed for everyone to get out of the house. We didn't know where he was, but the fire stopped us from getting to his room. A couple cops showed up after I tried hooking up a hose from the shed to a spigot, which was unfortunately tied to the back house's now defunct water line. I suggested breaking the window to his room, but the cops said that air might fuel the fire, and it was best to leave it alone. We tried banging on it and shouting for my uncle, but didn't know he was already gone at that point. Out of ideas, I woke up my friend from across the street and we watched from his porch as the fire trucks arrived. My uncle died. He was alive when they found him, but he died later at the hospital due to smoke inhalation. Even had he survived, this particular dose was pretty bad, and he would most likely have suffered some permanent issues from it. Anyways, the house was well enough off to be gutted and refitted. It was about a year later that my mother, I forget what she was doing, noticed that there was a light on in my uncle's old apartment. Given his history, we assumed it was some kid or his old unsavory friend squatting or lighting up. We call the cops, and the same initial responders from the fire show up. They cautiously go up the stairs, peek in the windows, knock, and shout without a sign from anyone. Sure enough, no one's there. They tell my grandma and mom, who are still confused about the source of the light. The power's been cut for a couple years after all. We go up there with the cops and find that the ceiling light in the living room is on, which doesn't make sense. We flick the switch and nothing happens. My grandma and mom start to freak out, which unsettles the cops, especially the one that had a few run-ins with my uncle. We leave and watch the apartment for a couple more hours until the light is cut out on its own. Didn't fade, just turned off. Case file number 1136, written by Guns for Hands, The Day I Cheated Death. Nobody ever believes me. I honestly feel like this should have killed me, but now I'm in love. Some sort of alternate reality or some crap? Maybe I'm dead. I pulled up to a stop sign, looked left to see if anybody was coming, was turning right. I didn't think to look right, because it was a solid yellow line, and it was at the beginning of a bridge, so nobody should have been passing. Well, you guessed it, there was. I pulled out just in time to come face to face with another driver in a truck. He was passing a car, going probably 60 miles an hour plus, in a 50, and wasn't in his lane. I, honest to God, felt this car pass right through me. I swear I even saw into his truck. He looked just as terrified as I felt. That's how close we were. Like his truck passed right through me. I stomped on my brakes and put my arms up, bracing myself from glass and whatever the fluck else my arms couldn't protect me from in a head-on collision with the truck. I opened my eyes, and there was no one in front of me. I looked in my rear view, and I didn't see him anymore. I almost started hyperventilating. I was so scared. I pulled over and called my dad and just bawled. He thought I was bat crap crazy. No one believes me, and I don't talk about it, but I really just don't have an explanation. Would you like even more content? Here's my Patreon. Now onto the stories. Case file number 1137, written by Beach Chair Ready, The Sandwich Lost in Space. I always thought of this situation as weird, but never a glitch until I started hearing about this more and more. It's kind of a silly one, but I still can't explain it. About 20 years ago, I lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment with my boyfriend. I was making myself an enormous delicious sandwich in the kitchen, and had just put everything away when he called me into the living room to look at something on the TV. The living room was literally 2 steps outside the tiny kitchen. When I came back from my sandwich, a few minutes later, it was gone. Just gone. Even though I knew I hadn't gone anywhere else, I began to search our entire 420 square foot apartment. My boyfriend even started looking too. After a few minutes of looking around the living room and bedroom, repeating, "It couldn't have just disappeared," over and over, I went back to the kitchen to make another and saw it sitting on the floor perfectly. There's no way I could have knocked it off the counter and had it fall in the middle of the floor, sitting perfectly with everything still intact. Also, there's no way I would have just set it on the floor before walking out of the kitchen. No way. It was so weird. My boyfriend called me a dirty sim for a long time after that. If you've ever played Sims, you know when they are dirty, they will put food on the floor. Kinda funny, but maybe a glitch? Either way, it freaked me out. Bonus file written by Seagull, The Scent of Eternal Love. My step-grandfather was my best friend, my main father figure in my life, as I never met my dad. Before he passed, he had a stroke, and he wasn't able to speak nor able to communicate in any way. He was only able to move his eyes, but not so much. At one point, I spent the night at the hospital, as it was my shift to take over while my grandma and mom went home to rest. While he was asleep, I just had this urge that I needed to tell him everything now, almost like I only had this amount of time left, so tell him everything. I told him how much I loved him, and how much he meant to me, and that he's going to get better, and we're going to go fishing and do the fun stuff we usually do. The next morning, my mom and grandma get to the hospital, and my grandfather is still asleep, so I head home to rest for a bit. I get home, take a shower, and log into World of Warcraft, my girlfriend on the couch behind. I smell my grandfather's scent, as strong as ever, his cologne. Almost felt like he was sitting right next to me. Then I feel this really warm hand touch my hand. As I am about to reach my shoulder to touch it, my girlfriend answers my cell phone and touches the same shoulder and tells me my grandfather passed away. I was devastated to say the least. Fast forward to about 8 months later. I was in a dark place and just needed someone to talk to. My grandfather was the main person I talked to about everything. I was having a rage, almost like I needed closure to why my grandfather passed away and I needed him. I also needed to know why he passed and why something so awful would happen. He wasn't able to respond, which hurt the most. I have this dream. The room was all white, almost blindingly white. There's a table in the middle of the room, and I see this elderly man sitting, and I go over and sit down, and it's my grandfather. He asks how I'm doing, and I spill my guts out and tell him everything, fully crying, tears and snot everywhere. All he says is, "I'm doing fine, and I heard everything you said. Just know I will always be with you, and if you ever need me, I will be there." Then I wake up suddenly. My pillow is soaked, and I feel my face is wet from all the tears I just wept. Most surreal experience I have ever had. Case file number 1138, written by Shanna24601, The Time Traveling Skater. So this happened about a week ago, but my memory is still pretty fresh. My boyfriend and I were in the car on the way to get dinner and chatting casually. Everything was normal. As we pulled up to a red light, somebody caught my attention. There was a guy, I'd say between 15 and 18 years old, walking on the sidewalk across the street. I noticed him because he looked like he was straight out of 2004. He was wearing baggy jeans, a gray beanie, and a black t-shirt over a long-sleeve white shirt. I thought it was funny, figured he was some kind of skater, and pointed it out to my boyfriend and made some joke about the guy being from the 2000s. We both agreed he looked out of place, and that's when we started joking that he must be a time traveler. I said something like, "He's probably thinking, 'Whoa, dude, where am I?' And as soon as I said it, the guy started to look around like he was confused. We were in a car and across a busy street from him. No way he heard us. We remarked that it was weird as we watched the guy look around confused for a few moments. Then we both looked away for no more than half a second. I don't remember why. And when we turned back, the guy was gone. At first we laughed and thought it was funny. But the more we looked, the more we realized he had nowhere to go, and he really just completely disappeared. I can't stress this enough, we barely looked away, and he had nowhere to go that we wouldn't be able to see him. We both freaked out and drove most of the rest of the way in silence while we thought about time travel. We haven't really talked about it since, but we agree that it was obviously really weird. Case file number 1139, written by What a Pass by Jockick, The Quantum Washing Machine. So this happened earlier this morning, but it's still on everyone's mind here. I was doing the laundry and moving clothes from the washing machine to the dryer. While I was moving things over, I picked up my Optimus Prime shirt and put it in the dryer. Then one of my kids needed me in the kitchen, so I walked away. When I went back to the washing machine, I picked up the next item, and it was again my Optimus Prime shirt. I figured I'd just mistaken the first shirt or so, and threw it in there as well. A few items later, again one of my kids needed something, so I walked away, and when I got back, I again pulled out the same Optimus Prime shirt from the washing machine, and I said out loud, "What the hell, this is weird." And I threw that one in the dryer too. My oldest daughter walked in and asked what was going on, and I told her, and she looked in the dryer and she said there's 3 of the shirts in there. It's impossible as I only own one. So I go look in the dryer and yes, indeed, there's 3 identical shirts, all wet as well. My daughter gets excited and calls my wife to take a look to confirm we're not crazy. My wife takes a look and also sees the 3 identical shirts, and she knows I only own one as she bought it for me. My wife says she would take a picture and she walks out of the laundry room to get her phone. While she was getting her phone, there's a loud bang coming from the laundry room, and we all quickly go back in there. Nothing seemed out of place or fallen, but when my daughter looked in the dryer, there's only one Optimus Prime shirt now. We emptied the dryer, but in the end, there was only a single shirt. Still no idea what happened there, but all three of us saw the multiple shirts. This happened to me back in the winter of 2003, when I was 16 years old. It is by far the weirdest thing that has ever happened to me that I still do not have an explanation for. It was a dreary winter day. All the trees were bare, and it's gray and gross looking outside. There is no snow on the ground. These details are important to set the scene. So, one afternoon, my boyfriend and I were leaving my house to go somewhere, and before I got into his car, I realized I forgot something. I handed him my purse and asked him to put it in his car. It was a bright blue Dooney and Burke purse that was widely popular in the early 2000s. I love this purse. I also had basically my whole life in this purse, my wallet and all my money, my Nextel phone, my makeup, literally everything that was important to 16-year-old me. I come back to the car and get in, and we go. A few minutes later I say, "Hey, you put my purse in here, right?" "Yeah, it's in the back," he said. I turn and look and see it partially covered up by some clothes. A few moments later, I turn to get it and it's not there now. I'm looking everywhere. Eventually, I tell him to pull over because the purse isn't here. So we pull over and tear the car apart. It's not there. I'm upset and ask, "Didn't you put it in the car?" He of course is upset too and swears he did. I swear that he even saw it in the back too. So we went back to my house, figuring it must have fallen out. We get back and start searching everywhere. Everywhere in the driveway, the road, my front yard, etc. My house and the driveway was not very big, so it's not a big space it could be lost in. At some point, my dad comes out from all the commotion and starts to look. We literally looked everywhere and it's nowhere to be found. After about 10 minutes of looking, I start to give up. I was very upset, thinking how I'll never be able to replace my phone, all my money, etc. I sit down in my driveway and then the weirdest feeling comes over me. I can only describe it as a feeling of warmth and totally calm, and it's like a voice told me to calm down and just look up. I look up and the purse materializes in front of my eyes. It literally just appeared right in front of me on our rock ledge. I say out loud, "Oh, there it is," and very calmly and almost trance-like walk over to it. My dad and boyfriend are just shocked because it wasn't there a minute before. My dad was standing right there. Everything is in the purse. Nothing is out of sorts. No marks or dirt to indicate it fell off the car or anything. And the weirdest detail is that there is no way 3 people missed a bright blue purse in the middle of winter with no snow and no sun. It would have instantly stuck out against the backdrop of the day. I even remember seeing it in his car. No people walked by as we were looking. Our neighbors weren't home. Just no explanation for how it appeared in front of our eyes, almost like I willed it back to me. I'll never forget that feeling I had. I've never felt anything like that again. My boyfriend refused to discuss how the purse magically appeared after that. He was really freaked out and just kept saying how positive he was that he put the purse in his car. I no longer have that purse. In a weird twist of events, I sold it to a friend years later who told me a few months after that it went missing from her room and she never saw it again. Case file number 1141, written by Astropharmacist. I met a time traveler. Here's what happened. When I was about 12 years old, I had an experience with someone who can only be reasonably explained as a lost time traveler or a spooked burglar. I was sitting on my computer, which was right by the sliding glass doors leading to my backyard. Out of the corner of my vision, I saw a strangely familiar man standing by the short gate, looking at me. I lived in a townhome community, so there was a path connecting all the backyards. It wasn't uncommon to see other people back there. For some reason, being observed didn't bother me as much as it should have, so I shrugged it off and went back to playing my computer game. In my peripheral vision, I noticed movement and saw that the man was about halfway into my backyard now. Every time I looked at him, he seemed to freeze. I got a better look at him this time, and while he looked extremely familiar, there was something deeply disturbing about the look in his eyes. I could only describe it as dark. Clearly, the only logical thing to do at this point was to go back to playing my game, so that's what I did. The next time I casually looked out into my backyard, he was right by the glass door, staring directly down at me. He didn't look particularly menacing then, more like a man deeply perplexed by what he was seeing. Well, at that point, I felt like it was too late for me to try to get away from the window because he was literally directly across the glass, less than a foot away from me. So, in my most ballsy power move to date, I looked him right in the eyes, smiled a bit, and went back to playing my game. This must have deeply unsettled him, and he started to quickly back away while still looking in my general direction. When he left, I just went back to playing my game and didn't even mention it to anyone else until years later. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I acted any differently. Case file number 1142, written by Beloved X Siske, the White-Haired Plant Man. I worked in a small private practice doctor's office where a good chunk of what we do is hormone replacement therapy. Lots of people choose to get subdermal pellets, and with them, you have the option to buy branded DIMs. There's a guy that comes in to buy this stuff fairly often. Like often enough to the tune of once a month, and normally he'll call ahead of time since we've been known to run out to see if we have any on hand. His last name is one of a plant, and one that also has significant meaning to me. When somebody makes a purchase, they need to sign the receipt regardless of their payment method. This guy always makes a really dramatic show of just marking an X on the paper. He's a funny old guy with white hair that makes me smile when he comes in. Well, last Friday, he had an appointment for his hormone pellet. Okay, cool. I was doing other stuff when I saw somebody come up to the counter. This was a middle-aged dude. I thought maybe he was somebody's partner. Most of our patients are women, on an errand to pick up supplements. He said he was the guy with the plant last name for his appointment. The guy with the plant last name and the funny signature, I thought, was considerably older. But maybe he dyed his hair and got cosmetic work done? Whatever. He comes out and I tell him his total and give him the receipt to sign. He signs it with his whole name instead of just the overly dramatic X. He didn't buy any DIM like he normally does and then went on his way. I thought about it all weekend and decided to check the past charge history on him to see if maybe I was confusing him for another patient. The only other person with the same last name is his wife, who is a woman with a chart as well, so I know I didn't confuse two people with the last same name since he's the only man. So Monday rolled around and I plugged in the name, and sure enough, it was that guy who came in about once a month for DIM, and the purchase history proved it. The strange thing was that when I plugged in the name, only his name appeared. He had a wife with the same last name before. I went and looked at his profile, and he said he was in a domestic partnership. What? No. The last time he had an actual legal wife with the matching last name. And then a few hours later, I saw an old man with white hair come in. He said he was here to get a bottle of DIM. I grabbed a bottle and told him the cost and asked for his birthday so I could pull his chart, as we don't just sell it to people off the street, and you have to be a patient of ours. I plugged in the birthday he gave me, and it was the birthday of the guy who had changed in the timeline. He gave me his credit card to pay, and the name was the same. There wasn't anybody else with that birthday in our system. I just kind of stared at him as best as I could while still being professional as he signed the receipt. He did a fancy little signature routine, but it wasn't the same overdramatic X from before. He took this bottle of DIM and left. Immediately, I pulled up the previous Friday's schedule and checked it. Sure enough, he had had a pellet insertion in the previous Friday and came in and had the appointment and paid and everything. This was not the same person in looks or his signature, but we don't have anybody else with that name or birthday. You can get in a lot of trouble for doing the wrong procedure on the wrong person, but neither the medical assistant or the doctor said anything when these were clearly two different people. I was actually laid off at the end of the day, or else I'd take a special note about when he came in next. I guess nobody will ever know the mystery of the body-shifting patient, but if anybody has any ideas, I'd love to hear them. Case file number 1143, written by D.S. Caramouche, A Biker's Strange Multiverse Journey. I left work at 20:39, or 8:39 p.m. My home was about 30 miles away. I hopped on my motorcycle and got on the road. Just as I got into the access ramp, I blinked heavily to avoid being blinded by a passing truck. Then I opened my eyes and found myself in a completely different place that I could not recognize, the motorcycle still going at a decent speed. The highway that takes me home was accompanied by the usual urban landscape. I was sitting in the middle of a small road with woods around me. I felt stiff and cramped, as if I had been riding for miles non-stop, and my helmet was gone from my face. The helmet wasn't the only thing missing. Once I stopped, I realized my jacket, wallet, my backpack, and my shirt were all gone. I was riding in my tank top. The clothes I had left were stained with mud and torn in a few places, and I had a dozen small cuts and bumps on my forearms and hands. Also, my knuckles and wrists hurt as sin. I pulled up Google on my phone and found that I had gone almost 136 miles in the opposite direction I was supposed to take. I had left at 8:39. It was now 4 o'clock in the morning. I had no idea how I got there, where my stuff went, how I had refueled the motorcycle on the way, and why I didn't remember a single part of it. My bike was running on fumes and died a few miles later, still in the middle of nowhere. I ended up having to call the cops to be rescued given the circumstances, who were just as puzzled as I was, but in the end, all I got was a tow for my bike and a ride to the hospital. The cuts on my arms? The doctor said it looked like the scratches someone gets from either rock climbing or being around thorns. 2 knuckles on my right hand were fractured, and I had dislocated my index finger on the left hand. It had partially snapped into place. The bike had no damage to it whatsoever, so I ruled out an auto accident or falling off. Only supposed explanation is that at some point I got off the bike and decided to play Rambo in the woods, then went boxing with a tree. It was weird as hell. Doctor figured I entered some kind of induced hypnosis or vogue state due to stress and instinct, and that made me follow the road. I don't feel like this explains it at all, because it still doesn't explain how I managed to refuel the bike, where my stuff went, and where my 8 hours had gone. I never figured out anything about this incident, since nothing really bad happened to me, despite the fact that someone tried to use my missing credit card to pay for $50,000 worth of crap. Also, I just realized something. My motorcycle is a Harley 883 Roadster 2011, which I converted to a 1200cc and took out the speed limiter. It gets up to 200 kilometers an hour, 124 miles per hour, easily, and that's hardly its top speed. When I came to, I was riding at 160 kilometers an hour, 100 miles an hour, which means I was hauling butt either way. It does not take 8 hours for a bike such as mine to make a 136-mile trip. It does take 2 tanks of gas, depending on how hard I ride, but still, this only adds to the confusion now. Written by Hellraiser. Something evil lurks on my property. I live on a 13-acre property in an area of my state where the suburbs turn into rural farmland. My parents live in the main house near our road, while my fiancé and I converted one of the barns on the back half of the property into our house. Our house and another barn are set in a pretty wide clearing/pasture, but beyond that, we're surrounded by woods on 3 sides. All of this is to say we don't get many visitors out here. From the time we moved into the house almost a year ago, there have been some occasions where I get this inexplicable feeling of terror while outside at night. I have lived in the woods my whole life, including in places far, far more remote than here, but I've never had this feeling. The woods are home. In every other place I've lived, they felt like my woods, but not here. I've repeatedly had the feeling that I'm trespassing on someone else's land, someone who is not happy to have me here. The other night, I took my dog out for his last walk. It was around 11 p.m., so it was pitch black outside of the ring of light cast by the floodlights on the side of the house. As I was walking towards the edge of the tree line, where my pup likes to do his business, I heard a sound like someone imitating the hoot of an owl coming from the direction of the other barn about 30 yards away to our right. I was so certain that it was a human making the noise that I called out, "Very funny, Dad." I just assumed it was my father closing up the barn for the night, and he was taking the opportunity to try to spook me. No one called back. It was at this point that my dog lifted his head from sniffing all over and froze, staring in the direction of the barn. His hair stood up along his spine, and he started to give a low, menacing growl. Now this dog is obsessed with all people and animals. Everyone is a friend waiting to be made. I've never seen him act aggressively towards anything, even other dogs that have tried to fight him. My dad especially is his favorite person on the planet, so there's no way he would have started growling at him. It was my turn for all the hair on my neck to stand up as a cold wave of fear hit me like a brick. My dog had stopped right at the edge of where the light met the darkness of the woods. Normally, the light gradually dissipated into the trees, still providing enough visibility to see the outline of trees and shrubs, but this time, it ended with a solid wall of black. Suddenly, I heard the same fake owl sound from only a few feet away, just on the other side of the darkness. My dog jumped and immediately started barking, putting himself between me and the sound. He's only a little guy, so I darted forward, scooped him up, and took off running towards the house. Behind me, I heard the sound again, but this time it had a strange warble to it, almost like laughter. The next morning, when I went out to check the barn, I found that the doors had been partially broken off the slide and were swung past each other the wrong direction, like someone had tried to force them open the wrong way. There were no signs of footprints in the sawdust or dirt, or any other signs of an intruder. I have no idea what was out there that night, but suffice to say, my dog and I stay well within the floodlights when we go out after dark now. Case file number 1144, written by Mommy Joe Jackson, the Bermuda Triangle of West Texas. Driving through West Texas, and on the left of the road, there was a small, abandoned mud brick house with an old, broken wagon wheel leaning on its front left corner. About a mile down the road, there was an abandoned mechanic shop with a rounded, rusty, corrugated tin garage behind it. We keep driving, and I feel like I'm losing it, because it's so flat and boring out there. Then I see a small building on the left of the road. It's a mud brick house, a broken wagon wheel and all. About a mile down the road, the exact same abandoned mechanic shop with the same exact rusty garage out back. We didn't get turned around, and I hadn't fallen asleep and gotten confused. I pointed out the repeated house and shop to my husband, and he had no idea what I was talking about. That was the first time he's seen them, and he really liked them because they were so classic looking. To this day, I swear to God, we accidentally drove through a kind of Bermuda Triangle thing in West Texas, and no one can tell me any different. Case file number 1145, written by MC Freak 2013. Did I sleepwalk through an entire conversation? I worked as the instructor for the pit of my old school band during band camp. We always go to a university for a week and sleep in the dorms. When I was a student, I had a roommate to help wake me up in the mornings, but since I had already graduated and was considered an adult/teacher, I had a room to myself. On our last day of camp, I woke up at about 8:30 a.m. to one of the assistant directors banging on my door yelling for me to get up. I had set several alarms to wake me up at 5 a.m., then some at 6 in case I overslept those, and so on. My girlfriend even agreed to call me to make sure I wake up because I can be such a deep sleeper sometimes. Well, I jump out of bed and throw some clothes on and run down to the field, having no time for a shower or breakfast since we started an hour ago. Before I left my room, I grabbed my phone, which should have been charging on the stand next to me. Instead, it was on the other side of the room with my bag that was already packed to go, which I don't remember packing the night before. My phone didn't light up when I hit the home button, but I was in too much of a hurry to worry about that at the time. When I got to the stadium, my girlfriend told me she called, and I answered and told her I was already going to the cafeteria building. I even replied to her text message when she asked if I was awake. I have never sleepwalked in my life, but that is the only explanation I have because I don't remember any of it. But sure enough, when I plugged my phone in, it was dead. I checked my messages and found we had a full conversation that I am completely unaware of. Again, all I can think of is sleepwalking. My room was locked and no one else had a way in. Bonus file written by Jody High Roller 1, A Doctor's Brush with the Supernatural. My uncle is a general surgeon in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and one time he told me the creepiest story I've ever heard. He was an intern working in the ER late one night, working with another team of doctors working to keep this elderly man alive. He had a surprising amount of hair for a man his age and had big bushy white eyebrows, but he was on his last legs, slowly dying, holding on to life. The old man was having a very serious heart attack, and the doctors were in a frenzy to assist this man just when another immediate call came in. A couple teenagers were driving around Winnipeg, intoxicated I'm sure, and they crashed into a guardrail. It was a very serious crash. The driver and person in the shotgun didn't make it, but a girl sitting right behind the driver's seat made it out alive but in critical condition. She as well was hanging on to life. The girl rushed into the ER, and my uncle was told to leave his station with the old man because his hopes were dwindling every minute. The moment the girl entered the ER, most of the attention was directed to her. There was a lot of blood she was losing. A lot of blood, my uncle said, and went into a coma for about 10 minutes. And within that time, he was told to leave the girl, they didn't need him anymore. So he went back to the old man, and he had died. This is where it gets weird. The next day, the girl was in stable condition. It was quite miraculous, he told me. My uncle went to talk to this girl, and for some reason, he didn't know why, he just felt like asking her what it was like to be in the coma. And she told him, "It was weird. I was in this vast, open, infinite dark space except for the speck of light far, far away. And as I walked around, I saw an old man sitting on a bench. I went over to him, and all he said to me was that it wasn't my time and to turn around. So I did. Then I woke up in this room to lots of doctors." My uncle was taken aback and then asked what this old man looked like. And she said, he had white hair, but big eyebrows. That's all I can really remember. His big white eyebrows. This story has always stuck with me. Case file number 1146, written by DJD 33J, When the Matrix Fails Science. Here are some very odd occurrences that our physics engine sometimes pumps out. One day in middle school, my buddy and I were bored and waiting for the class bell to ring, and we were having a tug-of-war with a pencil. We were pulling each side, and it suddenly popped into two very clean pieces. No splinters, nothing. The pencil must have been very cheap, and our forces must have been incredibly equal from both sides. It was perfect symmetry. Working in a restaurant, I dropped a glass coffee pot from my hands, waist high, onto the hard tile floor. Instead of shattering into 1,000 pieces, it bounced like a basketball directly back into my hands, as if time rewound itself to prevent the damage. Another time in that same restaurant, I was in a hurry and was walking at a brisk pace to get somewhere. I slipped on some oil and was met with the excruciating pain that comes with blowing out your knee, as in a kneecap dislocation. I've had 5 dislocations prior to this, and the feeling and pain was exactly the same sensation as those previous injuries. I sat there in shock for a couple of seconds before assessing the damage, only to find that I was completely fine, no dislocation, nothing. It was like I warped into an outcome where I simply slid to the ground. I promptly bought some non-slip shoes after my shift. One of the strangest things that ever happened though, was when I was sitting on the bed next to my brother, watching TV. For no reason whatsoever, I looked over at him and poked him in the eye. I didn't want to do this, but I felt like I had no control over what was happening. It really felt like something turned my head to look at him and used the control mechanism to extend my arm and poke him in the eye. I think I'm an avatar that some alien is controlling, and he just needed to recalibrate his controls because things were getting funky. Case file number 1147, written by Blue Shift Glass. The knife that vanished into thin air. I was in the kitchen with a friend. I was reaching up to the highest shelf to try to get a serving tray down. As I tilted it towards myself to pull down, a huge kitchen knife, the Halloween kind, came sliding off, point first, towards me. This was in a place I was renting, no clue who put the knife up there. Time seemed to slow down as I watched the knife fall towards my body. I heard it scrape against a tray as it slid off, and watched the point aimed right for my solar plexus. I had time to think, oh crap, this is it. The knife is about to plunge hilt deep into my belly at a downward angle, and I'm going to die, in a strangely calm and detached way. As the point of the knife touched my t-shirt, The whole knife just winked out of existence as if it had never existed. It was just there and then not. I was ready to write the whole thing off as a weird hallucination or something and question my sanity when I looked over at my friend who was standing next to me. His eyes are huge and his jaw is open, and he says, "What just happened to that knife?" I started freaking out and shaking all over. "Oh my god, you saw it too?" He saw the exact same thing I did. We looked everywhere for a knife like that in the kitchen and opened every drawer because maybe it fell somewhere and we somehow didn't see or hear it. No knife or anything like it was anywhere in the house. This was in 2007, actually the week right after Thanksgiving that year. Craziest thing that has ever happened to me. I wonder about it all the time and wish I had an answer. If anyone else has experienced anything like this, I'd love to talk. Case file number 1148, written by New York Frame. When Destiny Led Me to My Father's Lost Book. There is a teeny second-hand bookstore in the town I live in. I've been driving by it every single day for almost 3 years, and pretty much every single day I say to myself, that little bookstore is so cute, I need to go check it out. But I never go. I'm a personal assistant, and this week my boss had me take a day off because he was sick and didn't want me to get sick too. Random cancellations like this only happen probably 4 times a year. I was sitting at home and decided that I wanted to read a new book. I have 2 or 3 books that I bought months ago and haven't read yet, but none of them sounded good at the moment. So I decided to finally go to the teeny tiny secondhand bookstore in town to see what it was all about. When I got there wasn't a single person in the store except for the man working at the register. I wandered upstairs where they keep the fiction books and browsed around for probably 30 minutes or so. The store was indeed super cute and charming, and it was fun to roam around for a bit, but I figured that I had seen it all and decided to head home. I went back downstairs and walked towards the door, but I noticed the row of books that I had missed when I walked around downstairs earlier, so I went to peek down the aisle. As soon as I turned the corner, a little old woman that I hadn't heard come into the store startled and dropped the book off the top of the pile she was looking through. I picked it up for her, and it just so happened to be one of the very few copies of a book that my own dad wrote and published over 15 years ago. Here's the crazy part though, he probably only sold 25 copies, and they were all sold in a completely different state, thousands of miles away from where I am now. Yet I somehow still happened to be in the exact place at the exact right time to be near a woman that just so happened to drop a copy of a book authored by my own father right as I walked by so that I, his daughter, could bend down and pick it up for her? Case file number 1149, written by Needs More Tuba. I found a secret door in my classroom and nobody believes us. In high school, one of our classes was dismissed for lunch about halfway through. When we came back from lunch, there was a tiny door in the wall beside my seat. My best friend sat beside me, and upon returning from lunch, we both exclaimed, "Where did that tiny door come from?" Everybody thought we were joking, but only one other person said he'd never seen the door before, and then later he admitted that he was just playing along because it was disrupting the lesson. But there was definitely not a door there before. It wasn't the first week of school either, and I definitely would have noticed and made a short joke. I'm 4'10" tall, well, short, about having a door just for me. I'm assuming it was originally a coal chute or something because the building was built in the 20s and the door led to the outside. The only thing is that it definitely was not there before we left for lunch. We are both 100% sure and remain so nearly 20 years later. Our teacher remembers the event, so it's not just something we made up. Case file number 1150, written by Angus 000000, the TV show that time forgot. So basically, when I was a little kid, there was this TV show that me and my mom watched. I remember it so vividly. We were just scrolling through the channels when we stumbled upon it, and she said it looked right up my street, since it was a fantasy show, and I was super into that sort of stuff back then. It was basically a live-action show about fairy tale characters, and after the first episode, younger me was super hyped to keep watching it. We subscribed to a magazine called Radio Times, which is a TV guide, and the show was in there with the time slot and all. So the next Friday, or whatever day it was, we settled down to watch it, and it never came on. It was weird, but we figured it had been cancelled or moved channels or something. I was bummed out, but kinda forgot about it. I didn't have access to the internet back then, so I couldn't Google what happened to it or anything. Years go by, and people started talking about this new show on TV, and I noticed it had the same plot. I was so excited thinking it was a rerun of this show I'd longed to watch since I saw the first episode as a kid. But apparently, the show was brand new. I looked it up, and it was. I still refuse to get over it, and have never watched a single episode of the new version. The version I don't have a creepy old memory of. I don't know how to word it. Technically, both versions are the same show, yet I've had it confirmed by people that what I remember from the plot is indeed that show. Exactly. Case file number 1151, written by Black Gold 09. The Matrix caught my girlfriend cheating. I was in college. I had a girlfriend at the time who lived 2 floors above me in the dorms. I woke up at 3 a.m. and had a really weird feeling. I put on some clothes and started walking up the stairs, not knowing exactly why. I walked around my girlfriend's floor for a bit, this weird feeling overwhelming me. I put my ear to her door. Nothing. I start to walk back to the stairwell, but it still feels weird. I go back and put my ear to the door again and hear the faintest of sounds, heavy breathing. I try the door and it's unlocked. I opened it and flipped the light on, and her roommate were fornicating. She yells, "Oh God!" and runs to the bathroom. Her roommate just stares at me. I close the door. We broke up the next day, pretty amicably, all things considered. Some facts. We had been together since high school, and were a pretty solid couple. We specifically went to this college together. She never cheated on me before that night. Well, she says, and I believe her. Now, over 10 years later, she's happily married to the guy she left me for in high school. They have 2 kids. They never kept their door unlocked, so I guess it was an accident. Her roommate was bisexual, and they had been drinking that night. About a year later, I had a 2-week fling with her roommate who indeed confirmed it was the first time they had done that, and she didn't think she had cheated on me prior. I'm not religious, spiritual, I don't believe in premonitions, ESP, or anything like that. I have no idea why I woke up or went to her door that night. I certainly hadn't done anything like that in the prior 2 years we'd been going there together. Case file number 1152, written by Duckface08, Toy Story, Supernatural Edition. I was just a little kid back then when this happened, and at the time, I kept some of my toys in a large bag hanging on one of the posts at the end of my bed. One night, I was just lying in bed alone and awake, when all of a sudden, one of my talking dolls, the ones where you squeeze a hand or foot and they say something, in the bag, goes off on its own. "Mommy, let's play house." I was too scared to move, and could only get to sleep once my sister, whom I shared the room with, came in later to go to bed. Later, I had my mom throw away that doll. Fast forward a few years. My sister had received a Tickle Me Elmo for Christmas, and we spent a good portion of the evening playing with it. When we were done, we stood it up on the living room table and went downstairs to join our parents to watch TV. At some point, I decided to grab something from the kitchen and go upstairs. As I passed by, Elmo, still standing on the table, goes off on its own. "Why don't you play with Elmo?" I ran back downstairs. "Damn it, dolls, I will not play with you, stop asking me." Case file number 1153, written by Ham Broth, The Enigmatic Blue Figure. I think I was in 7th grade at the time, and it was around 3:30 or 4 p.m. in the afternoon. I was watching the post-school cartoon lineup with Rescue Rangers and DuckTales and all that stuff. My mom is nowhere to be seen because she'd just run off to I don't know where after my dad died, and I was left to my own devices with dinner. Usually I make microwave popcorn. That's what I got up to do this time. My room and the kitchen are both down at the very end of a really long hallway that at the middle point connects to an alcove that had the front door. I'm crossing the hallway from my bedroom to the kitchen and realize there's a figure standing in the hallway exactly halfway down, as though it had just come in through the front door. I stop and look at it, and it's there looking at me too. Now, this thing didn't have any details to the way that ghosts do in movies. It was a dark blue, opaque shape the size of a full-grown man. You could make out a head and limbs, but not hair or eyes and mouth or anything like that. I wasn't scared of it in the slightest. I just stood there and stared at it for a prolonged time because it was the freaking middle of the afternoon and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Eventually, I started to think, this is a bit weird. Why is this thing in my house and why is it just staring at me? So in my head, I think the words, "Go away," at it. I've never had a thought that felt like that one before. It was like I had said it out loud. It had weight behind it. The figure immediately turned and ran out of sight into the front door alcove. I ran down the hallway to the alcove too and found it empty. I spent several minutes standing there questioning my own senses and whether that had really happened and what was that thing, or was I going crazy? Then I went back down the hallway and made my popcorn. Case file number 1154, written by Vesh Wolf. The Spinning Stick of Mystery. Two strange anomalies. First, I was driving home from work through some brief unplanted farmland, winter and all that, and saw about a 3 to 4 foot stick about 15 feet off the ground. Now I could see it at a good distance away, but assumed some farmer kids got it stuck in some sort of wire or something that I couldn't see from a distance. Well, as I approached it, I could see that it was beginning to spin in the air exceedingly fast, only it wasn't connected to or stuck on anything, just a stick/branch spinning in the air, glitching the hell out. Second, a few months ago, my wife and I were doing laundry and getting our daughter to bed. As I walk up the stairs and glance into the master bedroom, I see something peek from around the stationary wooden French door. By something, I mean something. It was about 3 feet tall, had dog and cat ears, and was covered in brown and white fur. The thing and I made eye contact for a split second when it ducked behind the door as I jumped up the steps 3 at a time. When I got to the master bedroom, nothing was there, naturally. Case file number 1155, written by Anonymous. The 1,000,000-to-1 Mystery. It was 1,000,001 shot. While traveling for work from Orlando, I saw a handsome red-headed guy. I felt immediately and completely drawn to him while we were in line for security. I was stuck in the never-ending laneway behind him and never caught up. He ended up on my departing plane, and when we landed at the connection in Atlanta, he deboarded and disappeared before we could speak. Continued on my flight to Norfolk, Virginia, rented a car and drove 45 minutes away to the hotel where my company meeting was being held. Later that night, I was walking down the stairs of the hotel to the bar when the guy was standing at the bottom landing. Our eyes met, we smiled widely, and I firmly stated, "Well, there you are." We ended up at the exact same hotel, over 800 miles away from where we disembarked. How does that happen? We laughed, had a great conversation, and then he just awkwardly said, "Well, nice talking with you," and ran off. Totally confused, I thought for a minute and said to hell with it. Went to the front desk with my one business card, wrote on the back, and asked for the receptionist to deliver it to his room, but I only had his first name. She said, "There's 2 Andrews here. What do you want me to do?" I replied, "Well, just flip a coin and choose. No worries either way." He called me the very next day, and we dated for a couple of months. He was beautiful, powerful, intelligent, successful, and just wonderful in every way. Recently divorced after over a decade, I was the first woman he went out with since high school. We separated as I wanted to have a child while he was done after his 2 boys with his ex. Our time together was great for the both of us. How we came together has to be the strangest and most fate-driven story I can tell. Orlando has 850 flights a day, a 0.0011% chance he was on my flight. Atlanta has 2,700 flights, the connection, daily, so that alone was a 0.00037% chance we were going to the same destination. Additionally, there are 54,200 hotels in all of the US, a 0.00019% that we would end up at the same hotel. The chances of all that aligning? 1 in a million at least. So tell me, how in the world can this happen? Case file number 1156, written by Jorals, unraveling the mystery of the Oregon storm. My dad and I were driving through Oregon in the middle of the night during a storm. We had taken the wrong road and were driving on a one-lane road through the mountains. No houses, no cars, not even cell phone service, nothing but trees around. There was the odd flash of lightning, but mostly just heavy rain. As we turn a bend over the ridge of a forested hill to our left, we see the sky strobing like lightning, but in a continuous, perfect rhythm. I ask my dad what it is, but he shrugs and continues to concentrate on driving through the storm. We continue on past the hill, and it opens up into a valley where we finally see the source of the strobing light. Above the trees, maybe 50 feet up, was a large, 20 to 30 foot-ish in diameter ball of blue light. Difficult to tell the exact size, as it was still a fair distance away. Perfectly round, just hovering there. The strobing was coming from a single bolt of what I can only describe as lightning coming from the bottom of the ball and hitting the same tree over and over again and lighting up the sky. My dad and I watched it as we passed, and it continued on flashing until we rounded another bend and it was out of sight. To this day, we have no idea what it was that we saw. Bonus file written by Tweet Terror, The Mysterious Connection to the Other Side. When I was a toddler, I was living with my grandmother. One day, I woke up unusually early in the morning. It was still kind of dark outside, and I had dreamed of my great-grandmother and just felt kind of weird. I went downstairs to tell my grandmother, and she said, "I got a weird feeling too. I'll go see if she's okay. You stay here and have breakfast, okay?" But little me just couldn't withstand the feeling in my guts, and she was worried too, right? So I silently followed after her. It was just down 2 streets. When my grandma went into her house, I caught up with her, and she told me to at least stay at the bottom of the stairs. Of course, I wouldn't have come this far. So after a minute, I snuck up the stairs. The first room on the left, behind the stairs, was my great-grandma's bedroom. She was in bed, smiling as best she could as she told my grandma she loved her. She didn't even notice me as she took her last breath. But my grandma noticed me and hugged me in tears. It felt so right to be there. My grandmother was there for her mother, and I was there for her. And it just felt like she had called us there, waking us up even. Granny wasn't even mad. We went to church that day, lit up a candle, and were both grieving together. Bonus file written by Anonymous, The Ghostly Pencil. My wife and I stayed at a nice hotel in downtown Pittsburgh. It was where I asked her to marry me after a lavish meal. I picked the room because it came with a huge Japanese soaking tub that me, a 6'1" man, could barely see over the edge of. Anyway, the first night we stayed there, we were sleeping in the single king bed. I believe the alarm clock said it was 2 or 3 a.m. To my left, and just a few feet from me, I heard the sound of what seemed like a pencil slowly rolling down a sloped surface. It was so deliberate and loud that it woke us both up. It was also so deliberate that while my heart thumped in my chest from the sudden noise, I quickly convinced myself that it was a pencil sliding off the desk in our room, and I went back to sleep. The next morning, to my surprise, I found that A, there were no pencils in the room, and B, there was no desk. It was my first night in the room, so I assumed that it, like the other hotels, had a place to sit and write. Well, that was not the case. The only thing I could find to write with were ballpoint pens with their caps on. They wouldn't make that distinctive, loud noise that a ridged wooden pencil makes as it rolls. Furthermore, there was no sloped surface in the room for anything to suddenly roll off of in the middle of the night or morning. The whole thing was weird enough for us to talk about it that morning. I do not believe in ghosts, but to be honest, I'd love to encounter something unexplained. I entertained the idea of a ghost pencil, but knew in my head it had an explanation grounded in reality, but that's not all that happened. That night, we were both in the soaking tub. The water was up to my chin. It was great. We were in the middle of February, a cold and miserable month in Pittsburgh. We were sloshing around in the tub, having a blast, pretending we were rich. And then, from the other room, we heard the buzzing of an old microphone hooked up to a PA system. Basically, the sound of feedback that precedes an announcement. The whole room filled with the buzzing sound of a microphone feedback. Our hearts thumped in our chests yet again. And then we both practically jumped out of our own skins. We heard the distinctive sound of someone blowing into a microphone to test it. Oh, Woody! You could see it in your head. It was so distinctive, just like the pencil. My heart went from thumping wildly to thrumming like a hummingbird's. Naked, I leapt from the tub and threw a towel around myself. That was a man blowing into a microphone, I said. My wife stayed in the tub, scared and quiet. I searched our room and did not find a speaker or any kind of speaker grill embedded into a wall or the ceiling. We could not, for the life of us, find a potential source for the sound other than an iPhone speaker that was already playing music from my iPhone. So that was our story. We still had one more night. We were exhilarated by our engagement and the ghosts had haunted the hotel. A week later, I had the thought to email the hotel. I asked them about their building. Pittsburgh is an old town, and downtown Pittsburgh is a very, very old town. They got back to me and explained, as my jaw dropped, that they used to be an old telephone factory. I don't know why I found meaning in that explanation or why it made everything click so well, but my thoughts immediately went to the sounds of a factory, the PA system, the drafting table, all relics from another time in that building's life. Case file number 1157, written by Anonymous 1378-1378. Kitchen evidence of universal instability. My boyfriend and I got home around 2:30 a.m. after going to a concert. I was sober. He was relatively sober, 3 drinks. We were both hungry, so we decided to boil water for pasta and saute some spinach, a relatively quick meal to make. We had a gas range stovetop in our previous apartment. I put on a pot of water for the pasta and turned on the gas on that jet. The water starts to boil after a bit. I then grab another large pot for the spinach and put quite a bit of oil in the pot to prepare to saute it. I remember looking at the oil in the pan and wondering if I would need more for the spinach. I turn away as my boyfriend did something silly, I don't know what, and as I turn back to the jet to turn it on, he just goes, "Wait, no, stop!" I look at him confused and he points to the jet. All of the oil seeped through the bottom of the pan onto the stovetop, which I was about to ignite. It would have turned into a horrendous grease fire, and I would probably have been badly burned. We were really weirded out by this and put the pan aside and cleaned the jet. We figured there must have been a hairline crack in the pan that caused it to leak out. So the next morning, I grabbed the pan and put water in it. Surely, if oil seeped through it due to a hairline crack, water would pour out of the bottom of the pan. Here's the thing, nothing happened. Water stayed in the pan. We even put oil in it again to check. Same thing, nothing leaked out of the bottom. We're still not sure what happened that night. Case file number 1158, written by Lawrence Mim, The Keychain Anomaly. 3 years ago, my now ex worked in a small mom-and-pop restaurant with the 2 owners and 2 employees. One day, Donna, one of the owners, opened a package that had 2 small Japanese stress relief keychains that were pea pods, and when you squeezed them, peas with faces would pop out. She gave one to both employees because she just thought they looked kinda neat when she saw them on Amazon. About a year, maybe 14 months after that, he quit working for them. This is important. I had put the toy in its original package covered in Japanese characters all over it and put that on the shelf. He and I divorced about a year and a half ago. 4 months ago, I got my daughter back from about 309 miles away. One of her first days here, she asked me if she could take the pea pod out and put it on a keychain. I said, why not? Here's the glitch. One evening, after looking under the couch for the remote, I wound up losing my lighter between the cushions on the couch. I move over and lift up the cushion to retrieve my lighter, and when I lift up the cushion corner, I see something green. I lift the couch cushions to see what it is, and it is a small pea pod keychain. I go to my daughter in the kitchen and hand it to her, thinking she had got it lost. But no, she goes and gets hers and shows it to me. It had since been moved off her keychain, but is snugly secured to a phone case. We looked at each other in confusion, and when we squeezed it, the exact same worn out and identical peas pop up. We cannot figure out how an identical keychain about 3 years ago could be laying right under the corner of a couch cushion that is frequently lifted up. The one that was a replica lost any chance of ever getting mixed up and winding up here. It was lost over 2 years ago, and then really lost when he left 18 months ago. I have literally zero explanation for this carbon copy of a keychain to be in my apartment, let alone right under the couch cushion. If anyone has any ideas, I'm open to them. Creepy file number 94, written by Tidy Whitey's 37, A Night of Shadows in the Closet. I lived in an old apartment in 2002. The place was built in 1900, so it was just over 100 years old when I moved in. The living room and kitchen were fine, but the bathroom and bedroom were unnerving. Like I just always felt like I was being watched, especially in the bedroom if the closet door was open. Those unnerving feelings just became moderately uncomfortable as I settled in. I felt safe in the bedroom, but only if the door was locked. One night, I was dead asleep when there was a loud bang on my bedroom door. When I got up the courage to get out of bed, I checked the apartment and all the windows were closed and locked from the inside. The door still had the chain secured. No one was in there. I mentioned the closet in the bedroom. I never liked going in there, and I never liked it if the door was open. For some reason in my head, I would hear gasping noises, so for that reason, the closet stayed closed. A month or more after I was woken to the bang on my door, I was dead asleep, but something woke me up, and it was a pressure on me like being held down. It was pitch black in my room, I couldn't see anything, but I knew someone was standing over me. When I could finally turn on a bedside lamp, no one was there. After that, I couldn't sleep in the dark. I had to sleep with the lamp on. That incident scared the life out of me. And after that, the unnerving feeling of being watched intensified. Friends would come over and comment on being uncomfortable in the bathroom like being watched. It became so uncomfortable for me that when I had the chance to move to another unit, I jumped at it. I packed up and got out. After me, several people rented the apartment, and they would move out within months. I became friendly with the building manager and told him that I felt the place was haunted. He kind of laughed it off. Years later, they were renovating the place. The building manager was doing some painting there, and the building owner was there too. I went and checked out the apartment, and it looked nicer. It didn't feel as creepy. I got to talking with the building owner, and through the course of conversation, he just threw it out that a former tenant had ended their journey in the closet. He also mentioned that the original designer of the building lived in that apartment and died there. I wasn't mad when I heard that, but felt validated that what I experienced was real. Case file number 1159, written by Dearth of Data, The Cryptic Night in Iraq. My story is from my first tour in Iraq. We were stationed not far from Baghdad at the time. Our sector had some very heavy activity a couple months earlier, and as a result, there was a 2200 closing of checkpoints set at most crossroads in the area. No in, no out. This was followed at 2400 by a strict off-street curfew. On this night, we were lucky enough to have a patrol duty instead of manning one of those points. At about 2230, we pulled up to the side of the road for overwatch duty for a while, when a minivan slowly pulled up. An honest-to-God Astro van-style minivan. Iraq has vans of many makes and types. However, Iraq does not have soccer mom mobiles. Weird but not too weird, still cautious, could be anything. Probably just a local trapped on the wrong side of the CP trying to beg through. However, next comes the driver. I move forward to try and puzzle out what he wants. The driver asks in flawless American English, "Hey, are the roads closed ahead?" I had expected broken English begging me to help him through the very close checkpoint ahead. The best I could stammer was something like, "Yeah," as eloquently as possible. His response, again in a perfect American accent, "Well dang. Oh well, you have a good night now. Catch you later, buddy." I'm paraphrasing him, but I distinctly remember him calling me buddy as he drove off. I remember because as I wondered about his car and the conversation, I saw his license plate. It was from Florida. To this day, I don't know who that stranger was, but I wonder if he wasn't just some guy who got really lost and refused to ask for directions. Case file number 1160, written by The Best Yak Ever, The Very Strange Taco Night. A few years back, I wanted to do a taco night. I have this big frying pan I use to make homemade tortillas. I get my ingredients and then go into my cupboard for the pan, but it isn't there. I called my wife asking her if she'd moved it. She didn't. Perplexed, I rummaged through my kitchen and nothing. Nothing else in the house is missing. We have a security system, cameras, and a dog who barks anytime someone is at the door, and many times when no one is at the door. Hi, Mr. Ben. No one has been in our house but us. But the pan is just gone. We actually searched the whole house. The situation is so stupidly strange. Taco night was cancelled. About 2 weeks go by. Nothing out of the ordinary occurs. I open up the cupboard to get a saucepan, and there's the freaking frying pan. It's right where it's supposed to be, in a place where the two of us checked on multiple occasions that first night. The pan blinked out of existence, and then 2 weeks go by, or at least something like 2 weeks, and then it blinked right back in. Case file number 1161, written by Stewie Sack, The Sixth Sense. When I was 14, my dad and I were home alone as my mom and brothers went to visit my grandparents. One morning I woke up and got ready to go around to a friend's house. Dad said he wasn't feeling too great and that he was going to have a lie down. Didn't think anything of it and went to my friend's house. On the way there, I had this feeling of dread and fear that I couldn't quite pin down, so I phoned my mom and told her that Dad and I were alright, but he felt ill. Nothing unusual at all. Dad was ill quite a lot with headaches and whatnot. When I actually got to my friend's house, I was there no longer than 5 minutes when the feeling of dread got overwhelming. I felt like the world was closing in on me and that I was about to die. Fear welled up in me and it was impossible to ignore it. I left and walked home, not running, don't know why. The whole way back knowing and not thinking, I knew as if it had already happened that I was going to find something at home that I didn't want to. I've also just realized typing this that I didn't phone my dad as I walked home. I think I wanted to stave off what I was going to discover as long as possible. I got to the corner near my house and froze. A big hedge separates my house from the path and I didn't want to go around because I knew what was on the other side. I could see it in my mind. A few minutes go past and I eventually manage a few steps around the hedge and my heart drops. An ambulance is sitting on my drive. The fear and dread disappeared instantly, and everything just seemed to become calm. I walked past the ambulance, still don't understand why I didn't look in it first, and into the house. The living room is a mess. My dad's computer chair is on its side, and everything on the desk is scattered under the floor. I calmly walk through each room in the house, but no one's in any of them. So back out to the ambulance. I knock on the doors, and the wait seems like an eternity. I didn't want them to open. Once they're opened, it's over. But they do, and there's my dad, alive, sitting up on the bed grinning with the paramedics. I can remember saying, "That's my father," and then getting into the ambulance. I was angry, confused, and relieved all at the same time. For the last half an hour, my mind had convinced me that I was going to find something life-changing at home, but here he was perfectly, at the time, all right. When I left for my friend's house, my dad had gone onto his computer and suddenly thought that he was having a heart attack. He phoned 999 and tried to describe what was happening, but he passed out, and the next thing he remembers is the paramedics scooping him off the floor and taking him into the ambulance. Turns out his aorta was slowly but surely tearing away from his heart, and he was rushed into surgery. They chucked an artificial valve in him, and 10 years later he's fit as a fiddle. I'll never be able to explain what I felt and why I was drawn back home. I don't believe in anything supernatural or spiritual. So, coincidence, I guess? A bloody weird coincidence. Case file number 1162, written by Clicksack McQuack. My granddad saved me from the brink of death. So, I'll share a somewhat positive story. When I was very young, I had violent rear exit stomach issues and vomiting for a couple of days. My mom took me to my grandmother, who was a nurse. She took one look at me and rushed me to the hospital. I was so dehydrated that I couldn't even drink on my own. I came very close to death at one point, but I recovered eventually. A couple of weeks later, my mom and grandmother were talking about my stay at the hospital. My mom said something along the lines of how the doctors brought me back, when I apparently piped up and corrected her. No, it was my granddad. He pulled me out of the hole. My grandfather had passed away a few years earlier. My mother said my grandmother just closed her eyes and smiled. I can't remember any of it since I was so young, but I still think about it every now and again. My grandmother saved my life. I'm glad I was able to somewhat repay her by making her happy that day. She passed away a few years later. I'd like to think she and my grandfather are together and happy. Cheers to my nanny and my granddad. Case file number 1163, written by Erin Jill 1. When ghostly guests join you in bed. About 3 years ago, I was helping a friend move. It was a historic home that had been empty for years and years, built in the 1850s, I believe. The moving truck was a day late. Surprise! So I ended up sleeping on an air mattress. I conked out early, like 8 p.m., while she went out for drinks. I woke up because the air mattress moved about a bit and had gotten firmer, like someone or something had sat on the bed. I kicked my foot around thinking it was my friend back from the bars. Nothing. But the mattress gets squishy again. I try to go back to sleep, and about 10 minutes later, it starts happening again. Being awake, I realized it felt like my dog getting ready for bed. Circle, 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 pause, circle, paw, circle, pause, circle. Okay, lay down. I could feel the individual steps. Obviously, there were no animals in the house. I thought about pulling out my cell phone or getting up, but decided whatever it was seemed benevolent enough, so I went back to sleep. I didn't mention it to my friend at the time. She gets creeped out real easy, and I didn't want to ruin her new home. About a year later, she got a dog, Suzuki, and I'm visiting her for the first time since the move. Woohoo! Upgraded to a real bed and everything. A pair of shoes gets eaten by the under the bed space, so I flop on the floor and stick my hand under the bed to get them. Something licks my hand. Whatever. Suzuki clearly snuck under the bed. Pull up the bed skirt. No Suzuki. But a dozen or more dog toys. Weird. I mentioned to my friend, who gets real quiet. She doesn't know how the toys keep getting into the guest room. She has to keep it closed because Suzuki kept going in there and barking and scratching up the original wooden floor, playing so hard. My conclusion, lonely and friendly dog or cat ghost. I tried to convince her to leave the door open, but she won't. Doesn't let guests sleep in there anymore. Makes me sad thinking the ghost is just lonely. Bonus file written by Dirty Mouth. Whispers of Life from the Beyond. In 2011, my great-grandmother was very, very sick. She had just turned 90 and had been in a loopy state for a few years. She was suffering from internal bleeding, but the tests to figure out where would have likely killed her, so she was hopped up on morphine. It was so sad, truly. Mix that in with dementia. Anyway, my husband and I had stopped by to see her in the hospital to say our final goodbyes. She barely remembered who I was, but her eyes were very loving. We spent a great deal of time with her, just by her side, knowing this was her deathbed. After a long time, I went to lean in and give her a kiss. She whispered in my ear, "You're going to be a great mother. She's going to be so lucky to have you." My husband heard it too. I was taken aback. She couldn't have known that we were struggling with infertility issues or my desire to be a mother. I was a little upset because I'd given up hope of ever being a mom. I chalked it up to her dementia, kissed her head, let a tear fall, told her I loved her and walked out the door. A few days went by and I planned on stopping back again, but had work conflicts. The family let me know she was still holding on by a thread, and I wished she would just let go because I hated seeing her in so much pain. That night, I had a dream, a very vivid one. In the dream, I was a small child. My great-granny was there, in a flowing white dress with beautiful white hair. She had me sit on her lap. She kissed my forehead, told me she loved me, and then said, "If you were any bigger, I'd put you in my pocket." Something she'd always said to me. I cried into her chest, told her I didn't want her to go, but she told me she'd always be with me. Then she disappeared. When I woke up, the first thing I did was call my grandmother, my great-granny's daughter. Before she could say anything, I frantically told her about my dream, down to every last detail. She paused, sighed, and said, "Honey, your great-granny passed last night around midnight. Maybe she was stopping by to say goodbye." I was taken aback. I was raised religious, but I'm not religious myself. I remember thinking that I wish I could believe she stopped by to see me on her way to the other side, but that those were just delusional thoughts. I missed her terribly and cried. A few months went by. New Year's of 2012 hit, and I tried to have a beer with my husband, but I got sick. I was very tired, cranky, and sick. Everything I ate came right back up. I was convinced it was the flu until a friend told me I was pregnant. I told her, "You know I can't have kids." But I took a test just to pacify her, and my own curiosity really. Lo and behold, the second line came up immediately. I was pregnant. My husband and I went to the doctor's office a couple weeks later and saw our tiny baby on the ultrasound. We found out our due date was late August, the same day my great-grandmother had passed. I was shocked. What were the chances? Now I'm the proud mama of an almost 2-year-old daughter who has my great-granny's distinct little nose. She looks so much like her, it's amazing. I can't help but wonder if my granny knew something I didn't. She said the word she when she spoke of me being a mother. Coincidence? I'll never know. But I like to think she's still with me, despite my lack of religion. Case file number 1164, written by Suffering is Optional. The entire road just vanished. My brother and I were driving through a residential back street, trying to avoid the main road. This was before GPS was common, so we were using our sense of direction, and we ended up running parallel to the main road. I was the passenger. It was a bright sunny day around midday. As soon as we had turned onto this parallel road, we had noticed it was a long straight road, and we had a good few kilometers in front of us before it ended. So we relaxed now as we had a new path home. He looked to his right. Australia driving is on the right-hand side, and I to my left. This couldn't have been more than a few seconds because when he slammed his brakes, and I looked forward to why he was braking, it was because a goddamn street ended and we nearly mounted the curb into the house. And no, he didn't swerve. We were suddenly at a T intersection, and a few seconds before that, we had as far as the eyes could see of road ahead. We booted it the hell out of there. Case file number 1165, written by Chaos Chronicle, The Boy Who Conquered Physics. So, I work at a sandwich shop. Anyway, I was getting ready to close at 10 p.m., and I'm pretty meticulous about closing on time because I'm usually ready to go home by then. It's 9:55 p.m. and the bell rings, letting me know someone came in. I grumble a little bit because I'm tired and head to the front. This little boy, probably 7 or 8, is standing in the front of the counter. He's wearing this old-fashioned tweed jacket and a red baseball cap. I say, "Hello, what can I do for you tonight?" like I usually do. He just stares at me like I grew a second head. I stare back confused. "I have to use the restroom," he says and runs back to where the restrooms are. I hear the door squeal open and slam shut. At this point, I'm a little aggravated because I'm getting ready to close, and I don't want to have to wait on this little dude whose parents couldn't even be bothered to come in with him. So I start to close. I turn off the open sign and head to the back to do some quick dishes, thinking I'll just lock the door behind the little boy when he leaves. I finish the dishes and start to put the food in the refrigerator. I'm starting to get pissed. All I have to do is put the food away, count the bread, and count the drawer. I finished all of this and still no little boy. I put on my coat and get ready to leave, gathering receipts and such. I go to knock on the door of the boys' restroom. "Hey, I'm closing now, you need to leave." Nothing. "Hey, kid, come on." Still nothing. "If you don't at least answer me, I'm going to open the door." The lock was broken, so I knew I would be able to open it. I stood there, worrying that maybe something happened to him. "Kid?" I jiggled the handle open. I kind of covered my eyes because I didn't really want to see a little boy on the toilet. I expected him to scream or at the very least say something. When all there was silence, I looked into the restroom the size of a small closet. There was no one, no sign of anything. The lid was still lifted from when I had cleaned it earlier. No trash in the bin. What? I checked the girls' restroom and the entire lobby. Nothing. Nowhere in that entire shop. And there is absolutely no way that he left. It's impossible that he left because I've worked there long enough that the doorbell is a Pavlovian response. and you can hear it clearly everywhere in the store. I went into work a little early the next morning and got my check. My close friend was there, and she and I talked for a little bit about her boyfriend and gossip that she had and whatever. Then she says, "Dude, there was the creepiest little kid standing outside the front door when I came in this morning. We come in and leave from the back door." Really? Yeah, he was just standing there, staring out the window. But when I went to open the door, he ran off. What did he look like? I asked, trying to keep from freaking out. Boy, gray coat, red hat. Neither I or anyone else has seen or heard about him since. What the hell? Creepy file number 95, written by I've Seen Bigfoot. We found Bigfoot in Alaska. I was 13, camping with my family on the border of Alaska and Canada. I think it was June, just about dusk, and if you know anything about Alaska, you'll know that it was quite late. We'd been listening to what sounded like bear noises, moans, grunts, and caterwauls like you'd hear from baby bears, coming from the woods all evening. This isn't a terribly abnormal thing in Alaska, but still sends a shiver down our backs. My younger sisters and my mother and I were setting up the tent, and all of a sudden a bunch of birds freak out and fly out of the forest about 150 yards away. We all turn that way to look at the sound, and just as we do, something crosses a clearing from where the birds flew. In the clearing, there stood one tree with branches starting higher up, and as the thing, we thought it was a human, walked upright on two legs, arms swinging, etc., crossed, its head just came up to the lowest branch. We automatically assumed it was my 6'2" brother going into the woods to pee. It was one of those moments you see in a movie. I said, "That must be Blake." And not 2 seconds later, our brother shows up behind us, asking why we look so startled. So then we rationalize it by saying it must have been someone else going into the woods. My brother went over to the clearing to check it out, and as we stood and watched, we realized how huge the thing was. Blake was about half its bulk, and came about 2 feet short of the lowest branch that the thing's head brushed. He came back shaky and clearly startled. My brother, the skeptic, said he heard something very heavy running very fast through the woods. Case file number 1166, written by Novocaine. The moon is an illusion. So I was out leveling our family garden, picking out the weeds and just enjoying the evening, making the garden all nice to plant stuff tomorrow. I go to sit down, drink some water, pick up my phone to shoot a text to a friend, and then decide I'll walk down to my secret garden and fort to check out on my wildflowers and caladium. As I'm walking down the hill, I do my normal routine and look at the sky to see what the clouds are doing today. I look up and see this huge, bright circle and was like, whoa. Mind you, I've seen many a full moons. This was like in your face. Hi, I'm the moon, and you will notice me type bright. Yellowish, white, gleaming pearly moon, and a perfect circle. I've never seen it so beautiful. So then I text my mom something like, "Wow, the moon is bright tonight." I still have the text. I thought nothing of it really, besides the fact there must be a full moon. Cool. Sit in my fort and garden thing for a while, head back up the hill and go inside. When I sat down, I figured I'd check my moon phase app to see how illuminated it was. Sometimes a full moon looks full, but it's still at 85 to 99% illumination. I like to keep track of things up there. It's fascinating. Anyways, I look at the app and it says 10% illumination, waning crescent, age 26.47 days. So then I check Google, same thing. So I got up and went back outside to look for the moon, and it was just gone. Nothing. Only the sun setting. Got ballsy enough to just glance at the sun for a split second, just to make sure I couldn't do it like I did with the moon. And now I'm sitting here typing this out because I literally don't know what to do with this. I decided I want to push it to the farthest corners of my brain, under a rug, never to be seen again. But first, I need to know if anyone else has genuinely gone through something like this before. What did I see? 'Cause it sure as hell wasn't the moon then. A dim sun? An illuminated hole? A hallucination? A projection? Case file number 1167, written by ThrowRaw5977. the twilight zone of parenthood. My son is 2.5 months old and has only so many clothes. I wash his clothes every week and I dress him every day, so I know what clothes he has since I see them quite often. A few weeks back, my husband and I picked out some outfits for him from Macy's because we had a gift card. I saw the cutest gray onesie with blue foxes on it and bought it for him for bedtime. Tonight, during our usual bedtime routine, I dressed him in this onesie and laid him down for bed. My husband is playing his game and I had to run to the bathroom. On the way back to the room, I had some anxiety and wondered if this motherly worry would ever end. When I came back, I saw the exact same outfit on the bed. I can't describe the fear that I felt. It wasn't a scary movie fear, but I felt sick to my stomach and like something was wrong. My husband said he's always had 2 outfits, but I know for a fact he hasn't. I know every article of clothing he has. I've pulled every tag off of his clothes before I put them on. I would have known if he had 2 of these. I feel very sick right now, and I feel like I've changed universes without realizing it, and I don't know when. Case file number 1168, written by Current Tree 770. The Vanishing Act twice in broad daylight. This has happened to me twice now, within the last couple of years. The first time I was walking to work and on our city's main avenue. I looked to my left and noticed a man standing outside a building, talking on his phone, and he walked around the power or electrical unit that is outside the building. Nothing out of the ordinary. I looked away for a split second, and when I looked back in his direction, he was gone. He never came around the side of the unit. There is an alley that separates 2 buildings where he was, but I looked, and there was nothing there, no one. I had to cut through the parking lot where he was, and this man was just gone. That was the first time I had seen anything like this, and it still shakes me up. The second time was just a couple of days ago. I was walking to work, new job, different end of town, and going down the sidewalk. Now, my workplace is in a strip mall, and at the far right of the strip mall, closest to the sidewalk I was walking on, is the mailboxes for this building. I was coming down the hill and noticed a woman walking towards the mailboxes, again, not thinking anything of it. Just a lady going to check the mail for one of the businesses, right? I looked away for a fraction of a second, and when I looked in her direction, she was gone. No car had pulled up. There's no door next to the mailboxes, and from where I was, I would have seen her walking around to one of the sides of the strip mall. This woman had completely vanished. I turned to walk towards the building and still no trace of her. No open mailboxes. I have told my husband about these 2 incidents, and he's equally as baffled as I am. Has anyone else had this happen? We keep joking that it's aliens or time travelers, but it's weird that I've seen it happen twice in broad daylight while on the way to work. Case file number 1169, written by Nina Hagen, The Historic Twin Souls. 9 years ago, I had an experience that I still can't fully explain. Maybe it was my brain playing tricks on me, but it was unusual. When I was a teenager, my friend, let's call her Sarah, and I went to a local festival that our town hosts annually. This event is essentially a community gathering with street shops, live music, and the like. It's actually quite boring. However, one special feature is the opening of several historic buildings that are typically closed all year except for this day. Now, this part is a bit cringy, but we were weird teens after all. We thought it would be fun to enter the largest of these buildings and search for ghosts or anything paranormal, since we were pretty into that stuff back then. We wandered around the building, which is an old cabin from the 1860s, but the presence of other people somewhat ruined our experience. We decided to wait until everyone else had left before going up to the second floor to start recording. The upper floor of the cabin isn't very big. Once you climb the stairs, you face a small child's bedroom. There's also a short hallway to the left that leads up to the master bedroom, with another small closet area inside. That's all there is up there. Anyway, we went into the child's bedroom first and started recording in there. We joked about the mirror being haunted, made fun of a straw hat we found, and even joked about seeing a ghost in the window. However, nothing unusual actually happened. Once I got bored of that room, I decided to check out the master bedroom, but Sarah wasn't quite done looking yet, so she stayed. When I was in the master bedroom, I filmed around for a bit, and then filmed in the small closet, but again, I saw nothing. As I turned out of the closet though, I was surprised by a girl I hadn't seen before. I didn't even hear her approach me. She asked me what I was doing, and being the introvert that I am, I was embarrassed to be recording in a closet, so I stopped recording, quietly said, "Nothing," and went outside to find Sarah. When I got outside, however, Sarah wasn't there, and a minute later, she came out and asked, "Why did you just leave me in there?" When I explained that I thought she'd left me, and that I had encountered a random girl, Sarah said, "That was me, and you just ignored me." That's when things became really strange. The girl I saw didn't resemble Sarah at all. Sarah is short, blonde with blue eyes, and was wearing a white shirt with shorts that day. The girl I saw was much taller, had dark brown hair and eyes, a longer face, and was wearing a dark blue shirt. I never looked to see what type of pants she was wearing, but her voice was deeper than Sarah's as well. It was like talking to an entirely different person. After that, I really didn't believe that it was Sarah that I saw, so I decided to look at the recording. But of course, it cut off while I was filming in the closet, just before the girl approached me. I distinctly remember stopping the recording after seeing the girl, since I was feeling embarrassed about filming in a closet, so that really confused me. It was like something you'd see in a horror movie where you'd think you have proof, only for it to miraculously disappear. Unfortunately, I don't have the video anymore since it was almost a decade ago. Even if I did, it would only show me filming in the closet room before it abruptly ended. I'm sure anyone listening to this might be skeptical, as I would be, but it's definitely one of the most unusual experiences I've ever had. As I said, it could have been my brain playing tricks on me, but you'd think experiences like this would happen to me more often if that were the case. Some of you may also think that I was just imagining it since I was specifically looking for ghosts, but we'd done that countless times before, with nothing like this ever happening. I also don't think I'd imagine a ghost that looked so lifelike. This was like encountering any other person on the street. It didn't seem paranormal at all. All I know is that it's an experience I'll never forget. After replying to comments, I was reminded of other experiences that happened after this that are related, so I'll tell them below. There are two things that I'd like to point out, however. I was 16 at the time, and she was 15, so we were young, but not like little kids or anything like that. I'd also like to point out that Sarah and I were mentally in sync, if that makes sense. I mean, we thought almost exactly the same to the point where it was creepy. We even used to make fun of it. She's a very positive person, and I'm a negative person, so we'd make fun of that old opposites attract proverb. I mean, we were so in sync that we'd have at least 12 jinx moments where we could say the exact same thing at the same time every time we saw each other. And these weren't common expressions. These were just random sentences and phrases every time. We actually wondered if we knew each other in past lives, and that's why we had that connection. I'm not sure if past lives are real, but if they are, I have no doubt that we'd have met. We also had this weird ability where we seemed to be able to sense when one of us was about to call or text. We'd get this feeling, and within a minute, it would happen. It was such a strong connection that our other friends even noticed it and pointed it out to us several times, so we know it wasn't just us. That all sounds completely made up, but it's not. I've never had that connection with anybody else in my life, and I'm afraid we lost it after she moved and we lost contact, but I cherish those memories. It was such an unreal experience and one that I'd hope everybody can have at some point in their life, but I don't think many do. Anyway, the reason I decided to bore you with that long explanation is because when I saw this strange girl in the cabin that was apparently Sarah, it really did seem like a completely different person. I didn't have that special connection with this girl, and it was like talking to a complete stranger. I think that's one of the reasons why I remember the experience so well. Alright, now I'll get on to the other two experiences that I was reminded of that I think are related to this one. The first happened the afternoon after we visited the cabin. During our time in the cabin, we took this old shoe buckle that we found. We weren't the best of people. That was about 1.5 to 2 inches long. And that afternoon, we were jumping on a trampoline with it, trying not to get hit by it, because why not? I distinctly remember that it fell off 5 times. Up until the 5th time it fell off, we had no problem seeing where it landed and retrieving it within a few seconds. But on the 5th time, we couldn't find it. We both saw exactly where it fell off, and it was right between the springs, so it couldn't have gone far. We both searched for it for about an hour, both under and within a 50-foot radius of the trampoline, but we just could not find it. I even went back a little later with my metal detector, and it was nowhere to be found. To this day, we have never found it, and we both joked at the time that it probably went to another dimension. The second experience is very similar to that one. We also took this old button from the cabin at the same time we took the buckle. Again, we weren't the best people. And after we spent about an hour looking for the vanishing buckle, we decided to do the same thing with the button. And I'm not kidding when I say that it also disappeared the first time it fell off. After that, we decided to just go inside because it was creepy that 2 things from the cabin disappeared in the same way. The difference here is that we actually found the button about a week later in the clothes basket in her closet, and she swears to me that she didn't go looking for it later. There's always the possibility that she did look for it and planted it there, but it didn't seem like she was lying, and we had an excellent ability to tell when the other was lying because of that special connection that we had. I do still have the button as well. Alright, that's the end for now. Upon reading it all, it does seem like a far-fetched tale, but this really was just one long, unusual series of events. I've never had anything quite like it happen before or since. I'm sure there could be a logical explanation for everything that's happened, or maybe it was just really a series of unlikely coincidences. I'll never know for sure, so you can make of it what you will. I do know for sure that she and I had a connection unlike anything that I've ever experienced before, so I at least know that much is true. And maybe that connection is why these weird things happen to us. Case file number 1170, written by Hardigan99, The Mutating Road. A bit of context first. I live in a small town that, together with 2 other small towns from the neighboring state, compose a kind of cluster, like a triangle with a town on each tip. Let's call these towns A, mine, B, and C. The towns are no more than 5 miles apart from each other and are all connected. For as long as I'm alive, the roads between AB and BC were paved, but the AC route remained a dirt road. I've been in both towns countless times, traveled these roads by bus, cars, motorcycles, bicycle, even on foot on some occasions. I know these paths like the back of my hand. It's a beautiful place, surrounded by wooded hills, coffee and grape crops, rural communities, etc. So it's 2019, and the prefectures of my town and Town C decide to pave the road between them. Since they're in different states, they agree to start paving each one on its own side until the construction meets at the border. Great news for both towns. The construction begins. Every now and then, I hear that the road is looking great. People would say things like, "I've been to Town C this weekend, and the construction looks nice already," and "Can't wait till the road is finished," and so on. 2020 comes around, and so does the virus. Right before the lockdown strikes, we learned that the road was almost finished. Constructions were close to meet each other at the state border. Around 1 month stuck indoors, we're desperate for a change of scenery and some fresh air, so we decided to take a drive along towns B and C, enjoying the view and some music. We wouldn't even get out of the car, just drive. At this point, we had heard that the construction had finished and the road was now smooth and paved. I specifically remember my grandmother saying it as she went to Town C to deliver supplies to her sister at the time. One morning, we all hop in the car and just take off. We went to Town B, then Town C. But as we left Town C, ready to enter the road, we were shocked to find that nothing had changed. It was still the same old dirt road we had known for decades. Confused, we returned home, noticing that we were the only ones on the road that day. We couldn't spot any signs of construction or new infrastructure. Absolutely nothing had changed. We heard so much about it from so many different people, it just made no sense. The only strange thing was that we didn't see anyone else on the road but us after we left Town C. It was a bit unusual, but nothing was impossible at that time. Apart from all that, it was a beautiful day and we all had a great time. When we shared our experience with relatives and friends, They found it just as puzzling as we did. Some even suggested that we might have taken the wrong road, but we know it's absolutely impossible. However, by the end of 2020, when things were getting kind of back to normal, we decided to revisit the road. And lo and behold, it was indeed paved, just as everyone had claimed before our first drive. My father jokingly suggests that we may have traveled in time, and sometimes I can't help but wonder if there's some truth to it. Creepy file number 96, written by Hans Winkerbean, The Blood Confession. About 5 years ago, me and my buddy were up late playing some video games. We eventually got tired and went to sleep. I was on my bed and he was on a little cot besides my bed. This is what he says. At around 3 a.m, I sat up straight and started to stare at him. He felt uneasy and that's what woke him up. He said, "B, nickname, B, you awake?" As he started to focus, he noticed blood coming from my mouth and dribbling into my chest. He asked again, "Are you awake?" To which I apparently responded with a blank stare and blood on my chest. "I'm going to freaking kill you." With that being said, he shot out of the bed and booked it home. I woke up the next day to a vacant cot and dried up blood around my mouth and chest. I texted him to ask him what the hell. Then he told me that story. We laugh about it to this day and share that story often. Also, I chew on my lips in my sleep when I'm stressed out, which causes the bleeding. Everything else is still quite unsettling to me. Bonus file written by Anonymous, the Silver-Haired Sentinel. When I was a kid, I suffered from asthma bad. I almost died several times. Had to go to the hospital almost weekly. It was on one such fateful night, I saw something. I have never claimed it to be 100% true, as I was still lightheaded from the asthma attack earlier, but I know it wasn't a dream. I remember it vividly because my father, parents were already divorced and hated each other, so him being there meant it was bad, was driving us home. I looked out of the driver's side rear seat and looked down. There, I saw a dog-human thing. It was the size of an average coyote, with hind legs like one, but its front legs were that of a human, but with animal paws. It was covered in silverish gray hair, and its skin was dark and rough looking. As I sit up more to get a better look, it turns to look at me. Its eyes were pale white and empty looking. This thing was fast. It was keeping up with the car after all. As we continued down the road, I never felt scared or anything, just at peace. Like it wasn't going to hurt me, just protect me. Anyway, we turned our road and it stopped. I looked out the back windshield, and it just sat there and disappeared. From that day on, my asthma got less and less severe. I asked my father, who is half Native American, and he told me it might have been a spirit that was watching out for me. I'm not religious anymore, but I'll be damned if I don't have a healthy level of respect for Native American customs and spirits nowadays. Hopefully you enjoyed my encounter. Case file number 1171, written by Naughty Mutts, the checkmark of mystery. The most unexplained thing that's happened to me in my life was in a first grade classroom. The teacher had left the room while we were watching Land Before Time, and she had placed her favorite student in charge of the room while she was gone. Basically, her duties were to keep everyone quiet and also to keep track of misbehavior with a checkmark on the board. About 5 minutes after she left, this girl wrote my name on the board with a check next to it, meaning I did something wrong. Slightly flabbergasted by what she was doing, I didn't say anything and remained in my seat. When the teacher came back, she naturally asked why my name was on the board. This is the weird part. The girl told her that I had gotten up from my desk and hit a girl that was sitting on the other side of the room. Obviously, I denied it because I had been sitting at my desk the whole time. My teacher asked the class if I had hit the girl across the room, and every single person in the class, including my best friend, matter-of-factly stated that I had. Of course, my parents were called, and I denied it to them as well. My best friend always insisted that I had hit that girl. There were no weird lapses in time or memory, and that's the only time something like that has happened to me. Bonus file written by Weft, Seagull Ross and the Ethereal Evidence. This happened a while ago. I used to listen to Seagull Ross every night while falling asleep. I was always into the paranormal and still am. I've always had suspicions there was something in my parents' house. Well, one night, I was laying in bed just about to go to sleep. All of a sudden, I felt something walk into my room. It's kind of hard to explain. I just felt a presence in the room. I opened my eyes and of course I saw nothing out of the ordinary. I then thought to myself, I should try to talk out loud. I've seen this on stupid paranormal shows and stuff. So, I whispered something along the lines of, if there's someone in my room, give me a sign. All of a sudden, my CD stopped playing and it was just static. It sounded like a crappy AM radio station. My CD player had a built-in radio, so I'm not sure if that got switched on or what. At this point in time, I was petrified. All I could think was, oh crap, I shouldn't have done that. Well, the static continues to play for 5 to 10 seconds. I then say out loud, stop, with a little firmness behind it, but still a whisper. Right as I said stop, the static stopped and my CD continued playing without a problem. I used that radio/CD player for 4 years before that, and I still use it to this day. And nothing like that has ever happened to me before or anything like that after. It still sends shivers down my spine thinking about that. Bonus file written by Mr. Seabox, The Legacy of a Ghostly Director. Here's one of my many theater ghost stories. For those who don't know, live theaters are notorious for being super creepy, probably because it's a huge open space that is designed to amplify sound, and it is usually very dark when there are no shows going on. So let me set the scene for you. I'm in the light booth with the lighting designer. The light booth is at the rear of the theater and looks out over the audience towards the stage. It allows the light designer to see everything in the audience and on stage, so they can make the shows look good. So I'm laying on a couch that is in the booth, keeping the lighting designer company while she designs the upcoming show. The previous director had died about a year before this. She was beloved by the entire theater, so everyone was devastated when it happened. Her assistant had taken over as director, and we were programming lights for the dead director's favorite show, which the theater decided to produce in her honor. When the dead director had, directed, she had a favorite seat in the audience. It was where she sat for every single rehearsal and show for as long as anyone could remember. After she died, the theater even made a nice satin, seat reserved for dead director's name, ribbon, and refused to sell that seat. Well, ever since she had died, there had been a light in the audience that had been acting up. It was directly over her seat, and it would randomly turn on and off during rehearsals, but never during shows, oddly enough. The tricky part is that the audience lights were all wired through the light board in the booth, and they were all on the same dimmer. This means that you couldn't turn one of them on without turning all of them on. For reference, it would be like turning off a power switch that controlled an entire room of lights and having a single light remain on. Needless to say, everyone was perplexed. We had electricians come in to check the dimmer rack. We had service people come in to check the light board and DMX lines. DMX is a data type used to control theatrical lights. We even checked to make sure it wasn't getting power from somewhere weird like from the sound system. Nobody could figure it out, because for all intents and purposes it should have been impossible. So we're sitting in the light booth, and the light turns on above the director's seat. Keep in mind that we're only 2 people in the building, and we have already locked up everything. So it was already pretty creepy. It had become fairly common by this point, so we kinda just brushed it off and joked about it. Until the phone rang, that is. For reference, there was a phone on the light booth wall. We had tried to get it to work in the past. It could send calls, but could not receive them. Something funky was going on with the wiring, because you simply got a busy signal every time you tried to call it. We tried calling from cell phones and landlines, and neither worked. We had used it to order pizza a few times, but that was pretty much the extent of it. So the phone was ringing. The lighting director had been working there for 4 years, and I had been working there for 3. Neither of us had ever heard that phone ring, because as far as everyone knew, it couldn't receive calls. But here it was, ringing at like 1 in the morning. After the initial surprise, if I'm being honest, both of us probably jumped like a foot in the air. The ringing was really shrill and startled the ever-loving crap out of both of us. Our reaction was disbelief. Who would, or could for that matter, be calling at this time of night? I turned to the lighting director and asked, "So, should I pick it up?" She laughed nervously and said, "Go ahead." So I pick up the phone and say, "Hello?" Static. You would think that would be silent if there was a bad connection, but it wasn't. It was static. So I repeat my answer. Hello? This is theater name." Still static. So I jokingly say, "Nice talking with you too, dead director's name." And the audience light pulsed, then turned off. Needless to say, the lighting director and I gathered our things, shut everything down, and got the hell out of there as quickly as possible. Case file number 1172, written by Ultima95. A scream so powerful, it cracked the universe. About a year ago, my brother and I were reading an article on the internet at around 1 a.m. Parents are asleep in their bedroom, which is right next to mine. All of a sudden, we hear the loudest, most blood-curdling scream coming from outside. No joke, this scream filled me with instant, unfathomable dread. My parents' bedroom door shook violently, as if it had just slammed shut. This, of course, causes my parents to jolt awake in a panic. We all run over to the window near the source of the scream, and we see a woman with long hair and a white dress slowly walking up the street, crying and occasionally letting out a loud scream. My dad rushes outside and asks her what's wrong if she needs help, but she just keeps walking. Dad decides to call the police anyway. When they arrive a few minutes later, they find no sign of the woman. Also, I recently heard the same scream at around the same time of night, although it didn't wake my parents this time, and I was too scared to look out the window. Still not sure what I was witnessing. Case file number 1173, written by Jick0006. The Unreal Human Darkness. I was in college on a road trip with my two best friends. We stopped at a fast food place to eat lunch. After I place my order, I'm standing back, waiting for them to call my number, and I get this really weird feeling, like I'm not safe, and it's coming from the worker across the counter. I'm just absolutely petrified by this dude, paralyzed. Then, all of a sudden, as I'm looking at him, he gets this crazy black aura all around him. The best way I can describe it is that he had a cloud of black smoke all around him. Time stops, and I look over at my two best friends. They're paralyzed as well. I said to them, "Something is wrong here. There's something wrong with this man. Something is fricked up." They just shake their heads yes. We talked about it in the car, got the food to go at that point, and agreed that we all saw the same thing and had the fearful feeling before it happened. We've never spoken about it again. Case file number 1175, written by Sexy Chicken Lips. The eerie synchronicity of two family tragedies. On September 30th, 2001, my husband, our daughter, and I were going back from a weekend fishing trip. We were all very tired from night fishing. Our 5-year-old daughter was laying down asleep in the back, seatbelt on. I had my seat reclined and he was driving. I was half asleep and felt the car braking hard. I got up just in time to see that my husband had missed a stop sign and was entering a major highway intersection. I looked at my daughter, my husband, then saw the 18-wheeler on our left and a truck on the right. We were going to die. I held my breath. He punched the gas, and we somehow made it to the other side of the road, which is odd because we should have died. We sat there for a minute, and I looked at my husband and started yelling at him. He wasn't wearing his seatbelt. He was one of those guys that was above the law. He claimed it wouldn't have mattered anyway, so we argued all the way home. I get home and race upstairs to the answering machine, feeling like something was wrong. We didn't use cell phones then. No messages. I sighed. Husband and I made up, said sorry, and moved on. 2 hours later, the phone rang while I was reading to our daughter. I yelled to take a message. He comes up the stairs, face all white, and says, "I'm sorry." I grabbed the phone and my grandmother was crying. My sister had been killed in a car accident 4 hours before. She wasn't wearing her seatbelt. I have often wondered if there was a choice made that day, her or I. I'll never know, but we did find out it happened almost at the exact same time as our incident. My family almost lost 2 daughters at the same time in the same way. Creepy file number 97, written by I Like My Blue Eyes, the Mysterious Watcher. 20 years ago, when I was 8 and living in San Diego, California at the time, my dad was in the Navy and we lived in military housing. I had an experience that has since made me develop a phobia of windows with no curtains or blinds of any sort shut at night. It was roughly 2 a.m. I was having a friend sleep over, and my friend and I were playing with our Barbies in the living room. Now, the dining room and living room are basically just one big room, and on the wall in the dining room section, there were 3 floor-to-ceiling windows that had no blinds or curtains whatsoever. So anyone standing outside those dining room windows could easily watch whoever may be in the living room, and I felt like someone was watching us. I turned my head to the right and was greeted by a sight that I will always remember. It may not sound gruesome in description, but to an 8-year-old, there stood a man, a white man. I know this because he was wearing a dark blue short-sleeved t-shirt that had a pocket on one side of the chest, so I was able to see his bare forearms, which were also quite hairy. He wore a black ski mask and black gloves. He had his face pressed up to the window with his hands on either side of his face to block out any glare from the streetlights, watching us with such intent. I screamed my little 8-year-old head off and curled into a ball. My friend is doing the same. Sobbing, she asked what we were to do. I said that we were going to count to 3 and run upstairs to get my dad. We began counting, but I only made it to 2 and I was hightailing it up those stairs. My friend was hot on my tail. We bursted into my dad's room in hysterics, screaming about a man staring at us through the window. He didn't hesitate to jump out of bed and race out to the backyard, where the man would be standing. Of course, by the time my dad got there, the man was gone. Years later, I am retelling this account to my mom. My parents were divorced, but she lived in the area and remembers hearing about a deviant on the loose right about that time in that area. Was it him? Case file number 1175, written by My Name Isn't Patrick, The Moonlit Time Heist. 10 years ago, I was returning home from a trip with 2 friends. I received a call from my parents asking when we would be arriving, and I explained that we were about 25 minutes away. About a minute later, we came around a bend. It was a full moon, and we could see the reflection from a lake below us, and other than that, the road was completely empty. Suddenly, everything went completely dark in the car. No lights from the dash or gauges or headlights on the road. The music also stopped and restarted at the beginning of the song we were listening to. There was now a vehicle pulled over by the police about a quarter mile in front of us that hadn't been there a split second before. I assumed I had dozed off for just a second as it was late. I thought it was still quite peculiar though. After about a minute, the driver of the car turned the music all the way down and said, "Did that just happen to anyone else?" The other passenger in the back seat sat forward abruptly and exclaimed, "I thought I just fell asleep." We then realized that the clock in the car was reading an hour later than it had just a minute before. To keep ourselves from freaking out, we decided that the car had possibly had a momentary electrical failure and reset the clock to an odd time, turned off the dash lights, headlights, and gauges, and restarted the CD player. But when we arrived home 25 minutes later, we were an hour late. I am missing an hour of my life and to this day have no idea how it happened. Case file number 1176, written by Loco TX Work, The Thunderbird Sighting. This happened not to me, but to my mom. When I was younger, about 7, my mother and stepfather went to bingo and left me with the neighbors. Anyways, when they got back from their night out, they came rushing in, closed the doors, and were out of breath and kind of freaking out. I'm playing with their kids, and I'm overhearing my mom, stepfather, neighbor, and her husband, and they are talking in the kitchen, and my mom is explaining in Spanish. It stopped in the road, and the cars all stopped, and it spread its wings and then flew away. It was huge. Some guy tried to run it over. So I asked my mom about it, and she said, "It's nothing." The next morning, we go to eat breakfast at a restaurant, and she overhears some people at another table talking, and one of the ladies says, "It just landed and it was big, almost as big as a car, and then it flew away." And my mom asks them, "Did you see that bird last night too?" and they start talking about this huge bird that landed on the road, flapped its wings, and then flew off. Now fast forward when I'm in college, and we're talking about strange things, and I had shared this experience, and we're talking and goofing around, maybe it was a pterodactyl, and one guy, a stranger from another table, looks at us and says in a calm, serious voice, "Your mom saw a thunderbird." I looked it up and it freaked me out. I always thought my mom made up that story to keep kids in line, but then the restaurant thing laid validity, and then the college guy was very serious about it. Bonus file written by Tonzilla, The Dark Secrets of Clinton Road. Clinton Road, New Jersey is home to strange history, grim myths, and straight-up ghost stories, which makes it an ideal destination for bored teens who just got their licenses. One night, shortly after my friend passed his driving test, he picked me up in his dad's car, which had those obnoxious blue headlights that blinded me as he pulled up my driveway. We pick up some more people, drive around aimlessly, decide to go to Clinton Road and throw a coin over the bridge to see if the ghost kid throws it back, one of the many legends associated with the place. As we're driving along the road towards the bridge, a car with its left headlight passes us, coming the other way, and one of the girls shouts, "Padiddle," which made everyone laugh because most people stopped saying this around age 9. A few minutes later, another car with its headlights out passes, and my friend, the driver, screams, "Padiddle," kind of mocking the girl. 3 more cars without a left light pass us, which we're on alert for now, so we could each be the first one to say "Padiddle." By the last one, which was a cop, we were all screaming at the top of our lungs, not really noticing how odd it was that 5 of the 8 or so cars that passed us had a light out. We pull over at the bridge, do the coin thing, nothing happens, and we get ready to go back. Frustrated that I had never been remotely scared or excited, it was probably my 3rd or 4th time there, while the people I was with always were, I decided to really try to scare myself. So I told my friend to leave me there and drive down the road until I couldn't see his headlights, and then turn around and come back just so I could be alone in complete darkness in the middle of the woods and let my imagination run wild with the stories of ghost Corvettes, strange meetings, Wiccans, mafia graveyards, ghost forest rangers, and all the other stories I'd heard. After finally convincing everyone to go through with it, they get in the car and turn it on. I run straight to the door and start pounding on it for them to let me in. Confused about how rapidly I changed my mind after arguing with them for so long, they asked why I was suddenly so scared. "Because I know for a fact you had 2 working headlights when we got here," I said. "And now, the left one is out." Case notes, file 1134, the Seagull that refused physics. Yep, this seems to occur frequently with any flying object or bird. As you say, folded wings. The Seagull had almost certainly already passed away by then. It was already dead, in the air. But it took the universe simulation time to compute this fact. I think most animals are sentient, but I also think that the universe is capable of simulating animals as placeholders, decorative if you will. This is what's happened here, in my opinion. The program failed to load the full parameters for a few seconds. You weren't supposed to see that. Maybe you weren't supposed to look up there at that given moment. There could be advanced algorithms built into the simulation to predict what our choices will be, but in any given moment, these choices are not fully deterministic because we do have an element of free will, influenced but still able to break through what is predicted. So in those cases, you get errors like this, things you're not supposed to see. Ordinarily, you would have just seen a bird collapse, a seagull collapse. It would be odd, but not that odd, it does happen. Case notes for file 1135. My Vanishing Savior. Not only is it physically impossible, per your description of the environment, to have escaped away that fast, especially in a snowy environment. It's not like he could just run full speed on a flat, perfectly paved road. It would be slippery, snowy. But also, you were 7. No adult I know would just save a 7-year-old and then not at least confirm the child was okay, knew who his parents were, and etc. Even, a decade or 2 ago, after saving them. So yes, I think this was a force that saved you. Perhaps indeed a guardian angel sent from above, not your time. Even within the multiverse concept, there may be reasons why a soul needs to be tethered to one particular universe. It was a concept I keep thinking about. Because of the multiverse and quantum immortality, death doesn't seem to really matter. And that's good in a certain sense, it's not permanent, at least in the way we perceive it normally. But also, why save anyone then? Because they'll just switch to a different universe if that's the case. So there must be particular reasoning for someone to be in any given universe. And more to it than just that. Case notes for the bonus file, The Dark Side of Steel. I'm terribly sorry for your whole situation here. It's rough on people. They turn to any crutch they can in desperate times. I'm lucky in that while I grew up poor, I had love for my parents and the crutch was just gaming and eating food, but still being active so I never got fat. Lucky me. When I was homeless actually much later on, just like 18 or 19 in Florida, I had such a good base of love to fall on that no matter how hard the physical times got, I only focused on the silver linings. I was still kinda happy, weirdly enough, baking in the Florida sun. I remember sleeping on Cocoa Beach in Florida, like a week after I got there. The first time I overslept, the sun fried me alive, so bad that my skin peeled off a few days later, like a snake shedding its outer layer. It was wild. I was actually in a hotel at that time, even though I had no money, because there was the manager of the hotel that saw me in the parking lot. I was just, waiting there in the shade of above ground parking lot with multiple layers, so there was shade. Anyways, he saw me, offered me a room for the night, which was very kind of him. And my skin was peeling off in the shower. It was just, I was still happy, and I think the main reason why is I knew the future would be better. I knew I wouldn't be like that forever. And I think that's it. It's both the foundation of love, but also what really enables someone to endure hardship is genuine hope and belief that the future will be better. What I do wonder in this case, was it your uncle still living in that old house, as a spirit, a fragment of him, unable to move on from the burden of guilt perhaps, or total melancholy? I don't know, but something was tethering him there. I mean, I don't see any other possibility, because if the electrical line was just severed, cut, there's no way that a light switch could come on, unless someone brought in like a generator or one of those solar battery packs, but why would anyone do that? I don't think squatters would bring that along. And now time for the quote of the day. Nobody got anywhere in the world by simply being content. Louis L'Amour. You have to ask yourself where you want to get. Because if you're happy where you are, you just have a normal job and you're happy, maybe you have a family and kids, and that's good for you, well great. Then, you've made it. You've won life, I would say. But if you have a longing for more, well, that longing isn't going to materialize unless you take action to materialize it. And so if you're simply content, you're okay, but you want more, you have to form a plan in your head to get there. And that's the first step. Just use your brain and think. And then you have to make choices and maybe take risks. But the first step is just think. What do I want? Am I actually happy here, not just content? And then if you aren't, form a plan to get what you really want after figuring out what it is. Maybe that's the hardest part. Case notes are file 1136, the day I cheated death. So I fully believe you. The trick with these types of events is determining if it's precognition or quantum immortality. There may be connections there too, between them. I think in some cases, the subconscious draws forward from alternate reality permutations and buffered reality if a parallel world is nearby, close enough, as a defense mechanism in these cases, basically pulling information from what would be the future in different realities or your own. I think it's fun to mention that as a possibility. However, given there was no truck at all after this, the reset, my bet is indeed it was quantum immortality. And you're probably in a new universe very far away from the original. No truck at the same point in time is a significant divergence. It wouldn't happen in a universe right next door. Case notes for file 1137, the sandwich lost in space. Your boyfriend's joke hits hard. I've played Sims 4 a bit, mostly just to max out the fitness profession. I'd say this is a classic case of re-render error. I think the multiverse is involved. You looked away. No sentient beings perceive the object that was your sandwich, so it fades out of existence to conserve processing resources. Then you look back, and error code results in it popping back in the wrong spot, on the floor. Fairly simple, and fits quite well, in my opinion, because those errors only seem to happen when no one is looking. It's not like the sandwich was there, popped out of existence as you were looking at it, and then rematerialized on the floor as you were looking at it. No. It requires an absence of sentience, of looking at the object, which to me is just further evidence that we live in a simulation. some environment where reality isn't always rendered, or enabled, you could say. Case notes for the bonus file, The Scent of Eternal Love. Another tearjerker of a story. Oof. Thank you for sharing it. Indeed, I think his soul will always be with you, at least fragments of it. If he still lives on in a parallel universe, or all copies are used up and he's ascended to the next level of existence, whatever it is, I think for you, still trapped here on this mortal plane of existence, he knows you, he still loves you, and you will meet again, because his sentience, his energy, still exists. Eventually you'll join him. Maybe hard to locate him, but I think you'll manage it. Case notes for file 1138, The Time-Traveling Skater. So there's been a few stories I've read where people in groups see into the past, sort of like a holographic echo of what occurred there before. I remember someone saw an entire battlefield scene play out on a beach, or was it the remnants of it? Weapons and strewn about. Morbid stuff, but still an echo of the past. That was a very old story. Years ago I read that. This also reminds me of that picture of a man holding a cell phone before cell phones were even invented. It makes you wonder. Even though, technically, time travel to the past, it shouldn't be possible. If it is possible, it would involve the multiverse to prevent paradoxes, similar to how the speed of causality, the fastest you can move in the universe, is hard limited. And it'll even warp, like if you're going at 99.9% of the speed of light and then you have a flashlight on board and shine it, well, technically that light should be traveling faster than the speed of light then, right? Because it would have the momentum of the train as well that you're already on. If you're on a train and you throw a ball, that ball isn't traveling as fast as you throw it, it's traveling as fast as you throw it plus the momentum of the train that you're already on. It has that kinetic energy built in just by being there. So how does that work if you can't go faster than light? Well, the way Einstein solved this is relativity in time. So if you're on that train, time moves differently. And speed, what is speed? Speed is distance over time. So if you simply constrict time, then you're not moving faster. To your perspective, to the light's perspective, everyone will all agree that light always moves at the speed of light and nothing can ever go faster, no matter, even if you have built-in momentum already, because time just constricts. If you go 87% of the speed of light, if I recall, then time for you, in your local reference frame, will be moving half as fast as time outside of the whatever ship you're on. And the closer you get to the speed of light, the more it ramps up exponentially. It's not a linear curve. I just find that fascinating, that the universe has a built-in mechanism. That to me just screams, we're in a simulation. This is all designed, so there's a hard limit to how fast the universe has to process. Why else have that? I think it's all built in because it had to be, because the computers in the real world still have a limit to how much they can compute. So it had to be localized and limited to some extent. Pretty cool. Case notes for file 1139, The Quantum Washing Machine. The loud bang is the curious part. Before that point, I'd chalk it up to classic multiverse duplication. Transport, more like. What does the bang noise represent, though? So when objects duplicate or fade back to their original universes, there's never a sound involved in any story I've read. There's a comment I read, though, on this story, suggesting a snap from the air vacuum collapsing after the objects disappeared, the shirts. Which makes a whole lot of logical sense, as every cubic square of the atmosphere is under constant pressure. If physical mass is occupying the atmosphere where it vanishes, it would indeed create a sound as all the air rushes in at, greater than the speed of sound, back in to fill the void of the shirt, or shirts that disappeared. Now, it's not a lot of mass, but it's enough where there would be a crack basically from this speed of sound being broken, similar to the sound of a whip. Actually, this suggests that the objects in question vanish without first derendering. So I assume in the cases where objects derender and went out of sight and there's no sound, the surrounding mass, including the atmosphere itself, is also just not rendered. In that way, there'd be no air pocket burst or noise. So for some reason, everything was still rendering there in real time. Maybe because of proximity of so many sentient beings? Regardless of the reason, it's very interesting. And I think it even proves more that things do derender when no sentient player is observing them. Case notes for file 1140, A Winter Day and the Bewitched Purse. I really hate that, when people just shut down and refuse to even discuss an event like this. Are you kidding me? If something like this happened to me, where I saw an object rendered in real time and then de-render in front of my eyes, I'd never shut up about it. I guess it's a layer of fear from the uncertainty and questions it raises. Ah well. I mean, I did have a tennis ball de-render twice, but never in front of me. They just weren't in the places where they were supposed to be. I threw it, I didn't really see it vanish, it just didn't land. And then the other one just dropped it, and I could never find it. So I mean, in those cases, you're not physically seeing the crazy thing happen, which is a different layer of wow, right? If you actually see it vanish or reappear in this case in front of your eyes, you can't, I mean, how do you square that one away? You just can't. Indeed, I think waveform collapse is what's happening here. Matter is just reverberations of universal fields, multiversal really. Plenty of tricks the multiverse simulation employs to save on computation, de-renders included, but doesn't always go correctly. I speculate that it's related to predictive algorithms. So when we look back to where objects are, we know they were there, where they were, their configuration, parameters, properties, but if we weren't predicted by the system to look back in that given moment, it causes issues at the simulation attempting to reconstruct everything, but there isn't enough time, so there's errors caused. It makes sense. The more frantic we are, the more rushed, the more errors we'll make. And a computer is similar. If there's just not enough time, it'll have to sacrifice on some parameters and just like almost load at random. Sort of random. And now time for the quote of the day. Always forgive your enemies. Nothing annoys them so much. Oscar Wilde. Yeah, I mean, it harkens back to the quote of, Christianity turning the other cheek. I think there is something to it. Not always. I don't think you should be a placemat. I'm not a pacifist. But I do think that there's a point that's reached where it's excessive, especially when you get like tribal warfare, family feuds that date back, or wars that go back so far, bad blood between people where they don't even know what caused it. They're just living in their parents' or grandparents' actions and what they were doing. It's almost traditional hate. It's not real. They don't know why. And also, I think forgiveness, to forgive someone properly, they have to deserve it. And how does someone deserve forgiveness? To me, it's two things. First, they genuinely apologize. They specifically say what they did wrong, and not couched in some, soft approach where they're not really saying what they did wrong. They're trying to apologize, but they're halfway in, halfway out. No, they need to fully apologize for what they did wrong in complete, explicit, specific terms, and then also take steps to never repeat it again. You can forgive someone once, maybe twice, but I'd say once. Give them another chance. And if they really truly take action, not just words, but action, never to repeat it again, then yeah, you can start to trust them again and forgive them. Those are the key approaches in my view. If you do that, if someone does that for you, and then, yeah, consider forgiving them. And then they're not your enemy anymore. Case notes for file 1141. I met a time traveler. Here's what happened. Was he actually a time traveler? Maybe not. The way you said that he looked menacing, dark, or he was looking at you specifically. So if this was a time traveler event, my suggestion or thought is that he was you from the future, maybe looking on you now and almost apprehensive to the choices you were making at that moment and wanting you to change them, but also maybe not understanding that time travel will be multiversal related, so whatever changes you made would only affect you in that universe, not his original universe. So it's not like Back to the Future where impacting the past will affect the future that you came from. It's all divergent from different universes. So you can't fix your present by going to the past. I don't think so anyways, if I'm correct in how time travel would work. And, this man clearly was totally confused by where he's at. Maybe he was just intoxicated. I think pondering on time travel to the past just fascinates me too much. And another thing that's interesting to me is, maybe it's time travel not through technology, but what if our souls can drift in the ocean of time, with the flow of the ocean? We know our soul can navigate through space itself instantly, anywhere it wants to go. So why does it need to be limited to normal timelines? I don't think it does. Maybe the soul can travel to the past, unbeknownst to the person whose soul, is occupied in physical form. I don't think he was consciously aware of it. But the soul is still information and energy. So I don't think it would be traveling to the past of the same universe. It would still be multiversal. Case notes for file 1142. the white-haired plant man. So is it connected that you were laid off the very day this all came to light? Maybe a test given to you, like trying to alter someone's appearance, make it seem like they were someone else, and it was a test that you had to pass to not give medication to someone that didn't belong to? I don't know. Probably would have told you that if that was the case you were laid off, but the coinciding event where it's happened so close to each other does make me wonder. Given how strict it is to obtain any sort of medical pharmaceuticals in the US, I don't think that's it. I don't think there can be mistakes or errors like this. So I think the former person is probably the same as the latter. It's just a different universe. Seems to be in order, with obviously significant changes. Now time for the quote of the day. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. George Orwell. Ah yes, now we get to the rules for thee, not for me. If you have morality, law, morality, I think they should be entwined, often they aren't anymore. But if you have a system of ethics, it has to be universally consistent, which means everyone can adopt it and it applies to everyone the same way. And then internally consistent with itself too. But in this case, if you have a system where some people are more equal than others, well, you don't have an ethical system. You have a class system. I don't think anyone wants that. Not at all. Case notes for file 1143. A biker's strange multiverse journey. Damn, this is a cool mystery story indeed. You can make a movie out of this experience. Indeed, we can rule out alien abduction since it's patently clear you were actually riding the bike yourself. Someone took over your mind, that's also clear. Now, was it a temporary mental discombobulation from reality, where you were sleeping through an entire ordeal but still managing to ride a motorcycle perfectly? And also stop to hang out for a while, as you described, not requiring anywhere near 8 hours to make a 140-mile trip. So you stopped somewhere, maybe after you got gas, and just did nothing, just hung out, no one took notice of someone just standing there by his bike for hours? If we try to fit this into multiverse theory, you were blinded by the truck, which ended up hitting you, and you died. And then you were moved to a new universe, and maybe sometimes when making the soul transfer, there are errors in the process, where memory was not saved for the first 8 hours of coming into the new universe. So maybe for the first 8 hours, it was still you, but you were frazzled, disoriented, making choices and you just don't remember them. Maybe that, but it doesn't explain why you choose to drive 8 hours in the wrong way so slowly. And you were injured, your shirt was gone too. Outside of some actual possession, it does seem to involve the multiverse. But yeah, something probably happened during the transfer that just messed up your mind, for a time anyways. Case notes for the bonus file. Something evil lurks on my property. So I've heard that fake owl noise too, while walking at night on the mile stretch of road near my house. So I'm up to 15,000 steps a day now, by the way. Anyways, at the bottom of the hill, it's fully surrounded by woods, besides a cleared line that runs right through it where the power lines run through. Just as I approached it a few days ago, that noise, like a fake, higher-pitched owl sound, I heard it. I knew it wasn't right, and it felt very weird and tense. Whatever this hoot was, it wasn't normal. And I don't think it was from an animal. Not sure if it's exactly related, because nothing else happened to me or Mr. Ben, who was entirely oblivious to any threats. In your case, the fact the door had been partially broken proves to me there is a real presence there, capable of manifesting against matter. So was it a spirit that claims the land as their own, where they had died a while ago? Perhaps. Or maybe it's just evil incarnate. Or maybe it's just an actual human being who was just trying to spook you by imitating the sound of an animal. Then I don't know what I heard, but yeah, maybe it's just that. Could just be the evil of humanity and some person was trying to break into the barn. I know I've heard too many stories of people describing exactly what you did. Particular areas as being heavy with terror, evil. This like cloud blanket that's over a town or a particular geographic area. Maybe evil exists in a more real form than simply malevolent human spirits or evil people. And now time for the movie recommendation of the day, The Perfect Storm. Sometimes I find myself heading back in time to hit the nostalgia trip, and a lot of modern shows and movies just don't do it for me these days, with some exceptions. Sometimes I feel like an old man who doesn't understand the new generation. So anyways, I watched The Perfect Storm the other night, and it really hits in so many ways. The first thing that struck me is how normal it felt. Like everyone was just normal. normal phones. Everyone had to go and gather together to interact in like a bar. They cared for each other. Like some fisherman just meets a girl in a bar and she starts to care for him right away, just like that. And I mean, it makes sense because it's just your local environment where you interact with people. You're not interacting with thousands of people online. And don't get me wrong, the internet is fantastic. Obviously, I couldn't do what I'm doing now without it. There's some element of magic that's kind of lost with it. And obviously, it's Pandora's box. You can't go back. But it is just something to note. Anyways, the movie is really about character and risk and boldness and connections and love that persists no matter what happens. I think it's truly living life. I won't spoil anything, but it is a movie about fishing, the hurdles involved, and persevering in the face of moving mountains. Also, George Clooney proves his acting chops more than any other movie by far. I mean, he's great in the Ocean's movies, but I really love him in this role. He makes you feel like he really is a captain, and he truly loves it. What else can you want from life, besides loving what you do? So, highly recommended. Case notes for file 1144, the Bermuda Triangle of West Texas. So the fact your husband didn't notice the repeating pattern of mud brick houses and the mechanic shop could potentially be explained as him just being caught in attention elsewhere. As he's just a passenger, a driver would be much more focused on the road and surroundings just by default. So maybe he was in his mind and he just didn't notice it the first time around. If we go by that explanation for your husband, then it comes down to space-time portals while driving. Of course, the vector of transport was behind, opposite the direction of travel. These have to be placed intentionally, because if it was random, there's no way you'd have reappeared back on the road just, maybe a couple miles back. Why not anywhere else? Why not inside the crust of the earth, in deep space, or out in the wild desert landscape of West Texas? So why are they being placed? Because they have to be. There's no way this is just random. It's impossible. It feels like a test or experiment of some kind. Maybe aliens are using us as technological guinea pigs? Or maybe it's the government that has us? One way or another, there's some entity that is placing them, for some reason. As a test, I imagine. Case notes for file 1145. Did I sleepwalk through an entire conversation? So things like this tie into how our subconscious and conscious minds are interlaced and connected, but not always in perfect harmony. The player we are, the perception of reality, sentience, it's what makes life worth living and gives everything meaning. But it can be suppressed, perhaps even hijacked. In this case, probably just a suppression. No real reason to think to hack your body or possess it, just to pack your bag and talk to your girlfriend. Wouldn't really make sense. But that it can be hacked or possessed, so to speak, is both terrifying and incredibly interesting. I just hope it doesn't happen to me. Case notes for the bonus file. A doctor's brush with the supernatural. Wow, is all I can describe this story as. The white light. It's so pervasive in folktales, lore, religion, everywhere. Is it the bridge between our consciousness and subconscious? So you're dying, trapped in your subconscious. The infinite darkness shutting down. You're dying, basically, representing that. But there's one hope left, to reconnect your soul to your body in the white light. Maybe this is even like the transition point for quantum immortality. Maybe it is a choice we make. It doesn't happen automatically. It's just happening in our subconscious and we don't always remember this. And the man who had died was aware of a soul so close to permanently disconnecting and helped her out. The old man in her dreams with the great bushy eyebrows. It's a kind of beautiful thought to me. And now time for the quote of the day. To the soul, there is hardly anything more healing than friendship. Thomas More. Yeah, it's those connections we make that make everything worth living. It's sentient. It's connecting with other sentient players. And I come to this thought all the time when I'm playing video games. I have a lot of trouble to play single-player games. Like, the story can be interesting, but I'd rather just watch a movie. If I'm playing a game or some contest just against a computer that is inanimate, non-thinking, not truly there, I lose interest. My only interest is in playing games against other players or with other players cooperatively. Then there's meaning to it. There's meaning to the experience. We assign meaning, sure, but it's still real as we are, and I think we're pretty real. And even if you're introverted like me, it's that they're there that matters. Like, same thing in playing an MMORPG. I'm not always in a group, but just knowing that there's a world out there with real people that's persistent. It means everything. These notes are file 1146, when the matrix fails science. So there's perfect symmetry in opposing forces. The harmony, balance. I love that little first experience, even if it's not exactly a glitch. It's like peace from a pencil. It's just perfect. Then you have a classical localized time reset, and it must be trippy to see it happen in real time. How ironic. But it has to be that, because when you drop something, it can bounce to an extent depending on the properties of the item you dropped and also the surface of the ground, how much energy the ground will absorb. So like a tennis ball on carpet won't be the same as a hard floor, but if you're on a tile floor with a coffee pot or something, that's not going to bounce much. There's no chance in hell that it can have enough energy to bounce all the way back up. So it has to be a reset. And the last one, though, kind of deeply unsettles me. I'm thinking about the real us in the true reality above the simulation, the person that's connected to our host avatar, not from the simulation, outside of it. Can they take over directly from us? Are they us in the sense that we're thinking? Can they just bypass our conscious sense of free will entirely? What of people who suffer from mental illnesses, loss of control? There are accounts of people who have committed atrocities and later tell the authorities and people that they don't understand why they did it. It was like it wasn't them, like they had no control at all. Maybe this is entangled with demonic possession too, but that seems to have more obvious signs when that happens. This seems more fickle, random, or very acute, short-lasting. No matter what though, the idea of not having control of yourself is freaky to me. Case notes file 1147. The knife that vanished into thin air. Oh, this is truly incredible. I was going to suggest quantum immortality, but no. Your friends saw the de-render in front of their eyes too. Wow. So there was another story of shirts de-rendering, and a suggestion to explain the loud noise that happened in the story was the air rushing in to fill the void from the de-rendered shirts. If you think about it, any object that de-renders in real time, if the object isn't there anymore, the mass that was there would be occupying space in the atmosphere, and then it's just not there, so that would create a pocket, a void of nothing. And the pressure of the air would compress it very quickly, and that would be happening so quickly, faster than the speed of sound, and then you would get a sonic boom, basically. So in this case, you don't report any noise. So I wonder if that hypothesis fits. Or maybe you were both so shocked that the noise just phased out of perception, because that's the other thing. Yeah, a noise might be created, but you have to actually hear it and process it. You know, the whole, if a tree falls in the forest but no one's around, does it make a noise? Well, it does, in the classic definition of noise, sound. But if no one is there to interpret it, it doesn't really matter. Either way, I think this proves at least sometimes de-renders occur with intent. Maybe one option in the toolkit is guardian angels to protect over us. The ability to make an object vanish is a very powerful one for sure. Imagine if a bodyguard had the ability to, just de-render bullets that are fired at their client. That'd be pretty powerful, I'd say. Let me just take care of that for you. Case notes are file 1148. When destiny led me to my father's lost book. So even if your father had sold 100,000 copies, this would have been a notable coincidence. But only 25? No, this had to be intentional. I don't know you, of course, but my guess is, after being reminded of your dad, the book he wrote, you reconnected with him. At least more than you otherwise would have. And sometimes that's all we need, the slightest and rarest of little nudges. And now time for the quote of the day. Don't try to solve serious matters in the middle of the night. Philip K. Dick. There's a lot of things that happen in the middle of the night that aren't exactly productive, let's call it that. Although for me, because I'm a night owl, this doesn't apply, but in the context of what's intended, in the middle of your waning hours, or when you're tired, I guess is a better way to say it, more universally for us night owls. Yes. Try to think on something, but don't make the final choice until after you sleep on it. Which I think is a great little saying, just I'll sleep on it. Get your mind right, refreshed, get good sleep, and then you're gonna process things much more clearly. Good advice. Case notes are file 1149. I found a secret door in my classroom, and nobody believes us. So having multiple witnesses, or at least one that maintains it to this day, not the other kid that wanted to just move things along, conveys a lot of weight to this. So can a door transport over from another universe and integrate within the historical context of everyone's minds? I mean, it's not just the door, presumably there's a whole passage behind the door. So that seems like more of a stretch, but I've been wondering, in these cases where there are clear anomalies that pop up, divergences in the known timeline, quantum immortality fits well, but when multiple people notice, it means at least a dual quantum jump, a trip with two people in the same, space-time bubble that floats over. What makes me scratch my noggin, scratch it away. Why does the multiverse care about sending two friends, say, or loved ones, family members, to the same new universe? Or is it that mere happenstance, luck of the draw? The nearest suitable universe for both of you was the one that you wound up in. I guess Occam's razor fits neatly there. Maybe there are times where people are close friends and they die together, but they don't go to the same new universe. Maybe they're not perfectly suited for the same universe, but often they are. So, simple explanation, I guess. Case notes for file 1150, the TV show that time forgot. So this happened to me too, and I made a story for the channel over it. Although for me, it was only one episode that was different, not the entire series, or seeing the show and then it disappears from existence and then reappears, but it was related to a TV show, which is pretty interesting. For me, it was Stargate SG-1, the episode Entity, in I think the 4th season? Yeah, towards the end of it. So you're a visitor from another universe, I would say. I wonder, if we both traveled through the multiverse void, at least our souls did, is there a way to detect this? Does it change the energy state or orientation of our atoms at all? Any method to track it at all? Because as this stuff becomes more mainstream, the scientific method can get involved. Hypothesis, testing, predicting, and detecting. It would all be very handy and cool. It's almost like trying, to predict earthquakes or something like that. Maybe there's ways to do it where you can even detect death approaching and like a shift. And that would give a lot of closure to people who are in the original universe where someone dies. And I mean, right now, people aren't aware of quantum immortality, and it's still just a theory, a hypothesis, really. Although very compelling to me. You think about all the people in those original universes where people do die, they don't know that the soul moves on to a different universe and they just keep on going, unbeknownst to them most of the time. So it would give finality and closure for them. They can't talk to the person again, but they know they're still okay. Literally just living their life normally. That would be a very positive thing, I think, for humanity to know. Case notes for file 1151. The Matrix caught my girlfriend cheating. So they're happily together now, years later, with children. Was this merely buffered reality filtering down to your conscious mind from your subconscious, basically telling you that, yeah, this isn't the girl for you, mate. Here's why. And then it guided you to the unholy event transpiring. It just wasn't meant to be, in the sense that your life and her life, presumably, would be worse off. Maybe it's even more than that. I think a lot about the Adjustment Bureau and being guided by angels, God, the simulation masters. Certainly we're influenced by a lot in our lives with incomplete information about what those influences even are. But stories like this, in my mind, prove that there are forces out there that try to help us and have knowledge of the future, which I think, again, is a buffered reality. So what we experienced, the future already happened. We made choices. I believe in free will. It's just that we already made them, and now we're living through them again. Like going back in a replay in a game for learning purposes. I do that all the time. It makes perfect sense. I think we're just trying to learn who we are, really, and correcting the mistakes we make and learning from them, to re-experience them, to learn from them. Case notes for file 1152. Toy Story, Supernatural Edition. This happened to me once as a kid too. I wonder if our body's own EM field can influence the electronics inside these toys and dolls. Some people have very intense fields, which can cause fluctuations in streetlights, TVs, anything using electricity or that has capacitors built in. The only other option is that these inanimate items are being possessed, which is frankly too creepy for me to entertain. I'm not going to go down that road. No thanks. Stay away from me, Chucky. And now time for the movie of the day, Pitch Black. So this movie doesn't pull any punches, and I think it's Vin Diesel's best role by far. He has a look and energy of an imposing warrior, and indeed with a slight hint of something supernatural or above normality sprinkled in. The movie takes you for a ride in both intensity and suspense, but more than that, it has very strong character development. That's what I love most. When people are met with great adversity, challenges beyond what almost any human ever goes through, and overcome it, well, that grips me and thrills me. I want to see how people are going to react to situations that are just completely nuts. I mean, that's why I like Poseidon too. That's another movie of the day I'll get to. And it's funny too because I have photosensitivity. I get migraines if I'm exposed to daylight and I have to wear sunglasses outside. It's all kind of... Basically, I'm a vampire that likes garlic, pretty much. Anyways, it's cool that the character in this has to wear like goggles to protect his eyes because his eyes see deeply and light in a different way, and he has to shield them. Of course, they crash land on a planet that has 3 suns. Of course, it's pitch black because, well, not to spoil anything, but obviously there's an eclipse that lasts, and then there's creatures that come out, and it's very interesting, and I highly recommend it. And it's also part of a series. There's Pitch Black, and then Chronicles of Riddick, and then Riddick after that. So, worth watching all of them. Absolutely. Case notes for file 1153. The enigmatic blue figure. So immediately when you described the thought you had, how it had weight to it, when you told them to leave, my mind connected to a past story involving an alien encounter in a desert. A few actually, where people describe a telepathic linking. You speak words, and the alien or entity, if you prefer to call it, understands and hears you, quote unquote, and you can understand it at least in its intent. Same description back then too, no fear at all, nothing to fear. My guess is there are biological prototypes. They're testing how effective they can be in functioning on the ground and around other humans. They want to study us in real time, which involves blending in. There was also a story about a weird character that was actually inside a company, and the person meeting him knew something was off. He wasn't real, I guess. So I think they are among us, and they're testing different prototypes and telepathic linking with us, which I imagine they do with each other effortlessly, but linking with the human mind is different. It also reminds me of Slender Man too, but I think that's inspired from this weird reality we live in. Case notes for file 1154, the spinning stick of mystery. So when objects or animals get stuck in the sky, usually I chalk that up to space-time anomalies, particularly focused on manipulating the time element. In this case, it strikes me more as a universal instability moment. Those cases where gravity doesn't work properly, like a table lifts up and slams back down, or in this case even disabling friction. Otherwise, the stick would require a constant input of energy to be spinning, even without gravity affecting it, because it would be constantly bumping into all those air molecules. So somehow, either there was something inputting energy, something was physically spinning it, or was it just able to bypass the air molecules and not impart kinetic energy from it while banging into them, which doesn't seem to make sense, like it was phasing through them, but still interacting with light. It's very odd indeed. Universal instability makes more sense here. The laws of physics simply weren't applying it to it, as they should have. The other possibility is that this is some kind of test. Maybe the military, but it seems like an odd location to do that for the military. So if it was a test, it would be alien, most likely. Or maybe even like a spirit, trying to train themselves like Dean was, when he was a ghost. Case notes for file 1155, the 1,000,000-to-1 mystery. Sorry to hear that in the end it didn't work out. Kids can indeed be a breaking point. Now I'm thinking about Monica and Richard from Friends. They had the same issue. Of course, it's fiction, but it's a story that does happen. People get together, and they don't immediately discuss if they want kids, and then, turns out that one person does and the other doesn't, or maybe they can't have them, and that causes an issue. Understandable, but very unfortunate. We can't give up on what we want, or we'll end up resenting the other person down the road, even if we think we won't immediately. Eventually you will. It's like a seed that plants and grows and festers, and it's not a good seed. Maybe it was important for you to understand what you wanted most in life. Maybe you weren't quite aware of it. And this was all part of that necessary journey. One more domino falling, and millions more to come. Still beautiful, in my view. And now time for the quote of the day. The hardest thing in the world to understand is the income tax. Albert Einstein. I just love this quote because it's Albert Einstein. And yes, this was the code as it was, 50, 60 years ago. And yeah, I can't imagine what it is today. Personally, I don't agree with income taxes at all. I think there shouldn't be any. I think the fair tax makes much more sense. Not that I think any taxes really make any ethical sense, but that's a different discussion, I guess. I think in the end, making it as simple and as unobtrusive for people in their lives as possible would be best. As it stands now, most people work like the first 3 months of the year, entirely for the government. That's crazy. And the craziest thing to me about that is that no one seems to care. Isn't that crazy to anyone else? Case notes for file 1156. Unraveling the mystery of the Oregon storm. What I find fascinating here is you don't describe any sort of exaggerated or extreme noise. Thunder is caused by the rapid expansion of the air as it becomes superheated by the lightning bolt, which means if there was no particular thunder from this continual discharge, that it was very low voltage. It wasn't superheating the air. You could probably have touched the bolt, so to speak, and it wouldn't have affected you. Ball lightning comes to mind here, but I've never heard one described as being so big and also so perfectly round. Usually there's like reverberations of it, there's crackling energy coming off of it. It's not a perfectly spherical blue ball. What you describe is hundreds of times larger than a normal ball lightning, which in of itself is exceedingly rare. Could this be a technological test or evidence of alien presence in that area? Maybe. Or maybe it's an ensemble, a gathering of spiritual energy, which I do postulate the possibility that ball lightning is a type of spiritual energy that's condensed and emitting visible light that we see as a blue ball. What if a bunch of spirits gathered together? But what would they be doing in the middle of nowhere in Oregon? I don't know. Case notes for the bonus file. The mysterious connection to the other side. So this is the beauty of life, sentience, consciousness. We're connected on a deeper level to each other, especially those we love. How else can anyone explain this? You both knew, felt it in your gut via a connection from your subconscious, interacting with the same fields that your great-grandmother was interacting with too. She was literally sending you like a text message, a spiritual text message. Wake up, come, I'm gonna pass on. Just feeding you that information about what was happening, so you wouldn't miss that final breath. It's what she wanted. And while it is very sad, it's also cathartic, I think. You would have both felt much worse if you weren't there, I think. Case notes for the bonus file. The ghostly pencil. I couldn't even articulate how I'd feel if I heard a microphone noise in my own hotel room. Even believing in many supernatural forces, I'd at least get the room changed up. Well, that said, maybe the soaking tub was good enough to offset that. It sounds divine. Something kind of funny. Thinking about ghosts and spirits, they're usually invisible, right? Their presence was not always felt. What if a few of them are, well, peeping toms, let's say? What else are you going to do with your time besides watch some adult entertainment? I don't know. Watch video games? People play video games? Maybe. And now time for the quote of the day. For a list of all the ways technology has failed to improve the quality of life, please press 3. Alice Kahn. Yes, waiting online. Oh my god, and that terrible phone music that they use. I know it's royalty free, there's no real need to improve it, and they don't even want you hanging on the line really, so why not make the music as annoying as possible, right? But yes, this is not exactly the best improvement, although there is an actual improvement to this where some places will have you have an option to just call you back instead of having you wait online, which makes total sense. Everyone should do that. But I guess it's an extra cost, I don't know. If it's easy to implement, everyone should do that. Case notes for file 1157. Kitchen evidence of universal instability. So indeed pasta, penne, with spicy fire-roasted tomato marinara sauce is my go-to lazy meal. It's so good. I actually add some Impossible ground beef to it, and I add some cayenne pepper as well. I like really spicy food, as you can probably tell. The effort to deliciousness ratio is almost infinity. So good. It's not the most filling meal, but it's incredibly delicious. Now as per the glitch, I don't think you can frame this any other way than the actual mass in the pan losing cohesion. The molecular bonds holding the atoms together either lost electromagnetic charge, so the molecules of oil could simply flow right through. Remember that most of what we call mass, is still empty space. How would this loss of cohesion work though? It's never to my knowledge been observed in scientific tests, which leads me to speculate that there's a certain intent involved, because if not, we would see it in scientific observations. There has to be some block that prevents it, at least when people are directly observing. And it comes back to that so often, doesn't it? If we observe something, it affects it. I mean, literally, you have to observe something, light has to bounce off of it, but it's more than just that. I think there's a play in sentience, because light was bouncing off the pan when it lost cohesion. So there's an element of sentience to this, I think. Wonder if a spirit could affect this, temporarily bringing some of the mass of the kitchen pot into its own phase. So it's out of phase in the real world, or the world of the living. But why would they do that? It's an idea, but honestly, I'm not sure. Case notes for file 1158, the keychain anomaly. I agree that, per the description, those look very neat. A cool Secret Santa idea for this year. The only explanation I can offer is one that I often offer here, is that there's a certain lost and found that exists in the multiversal sense. When you start to understand this, reality feels a bit more unstable, true, but also more interesting, I would say. Things can go missing, and they can just reappear randomly. Maybe spirits are involved, but I think usually it's just the universe misplacing things. There's information in the server, and it's trying to computate everything, but sometimes it loses track. Things get jumbled together, misplaced, mismatched, and it also applies across the entire multiverse, not just a single universe, which means the amount of data being processed is unimaginable. Case notes for the Creepy File 94, A Night of Shadows in the Closet. It's clear to me in my readings that certain areas occupy a negative force in the universe. If this is drawn from general malaise of what occurred there before, like someone ending their journey there, or actual spirits, it's not always clear. But I'm not sure it's possible to truly cleanse an area. The only solution is to move away. And thankfully, it's not like this negative energy lingers on people who pass through it. As soon as you clear the area, the cloud of negative energy lifts away. Maybe if you're in that area, that negatively charged area for a long amount of time, maybe then it'll linger and almost like infect your soul. But it takes a long time. People who are affected by this, who just pass on through, entire towns that are affected by this, they don't report any lingering, lasting effects. So that's good at least, And now time for the quote of the day. Here's something to think about. How come you never see a headline like, Psychic wins the lottery? Jay Leno. Yeah, and actually, there's a pretty simple explanation to this in my mind. In that psychics, it's not so much an ability that's consciously willed, at least in the stories I've read. It's that some people are more, the link between the subconscious and the conscious is more open and flows more freely, so more information from the subconscious passes through. And the subconscious has access to all the information that's floating out there and can decode it and then transmit it to the conscious. Of course, the mechanism for that, it's not a willed effect, it's just whatever the subconscious ends up doing. We're just the host receiver that's connected to the body, but we don't really decide what the subconscious does. That's its own beast. So anyways, people who have this link that's more connected between the two regions, they have access to more information. But when that occurs, and what information it is random. It's not really in their control. They're people that, I guess, are blessed and cursed with more knowledge. But it's random knowledge. They don't control when they receive it. Besides, also, even if you could control it, you wouldn't go around advertising that, I'm a psychic, I can win the lot. The government would pull up and, have you tested and committed or probably just test you. So keep that quiet if there are psychics out there that can control their ability. Shh. Case notes for file 1159, The Cryptic Night in Iraq. Wow, so Florida man strikes again, all the way over in Iraq. Impressive. How truly bizarre this is, though. He had Florida tags. How does that happen? Was it a car that was actually from Florida and an actual American just there? Did they just import the tags over the license plate for some reason? Outside of importing the car from the States, like on a boat? Who would do that, though? What's the point? I suppose it's not impossible, though, but just very odd. Maybe we're dealing with a space-time anomaly that transported him far away? Hell, from his perspective, he might not even realize that he's in Iraq. Maybe he still thinks that he's in the US, in Florida, and that there's just some military checkpoint that's going on. I mean, it was US military, so, it wasn't like he was pulling up to a checkpoint with Iraq military. If you're in Florida and you pull up to a checkpoint and it's Iraq military, you'd be like, what's going on? Are we being invaded now? From his perspective, he may not actually realize that anything too weird has happened. It would explain the checkpoint confusion and how he's driving a minivan from Florida. That's all I got though. Outside of a space-time anomaly, I don't know. It's very strange. I hope he managed to get home safely though. Case notes, file 1160. The very strange taco night. Ah yes. The ever-alert dog, Mr. Ben, routinely barks at nothing at all during the day, waking me from my peaceful slumber. It's very frustrating, but Mr. Ben just wants to be safe. I like how you stated it so simply though, and indeed it's what I think actually happened to the pan. For a bit of time, it blinked out of existence. Rather how I frame it, everything that isn't in the cone of a sentient player blinks out of existence until a sentient player moves back in to look at it, then it blinks back in. Rarely, objects that are supposed to form back fail to. For a while, usually they return, but not always. And even better, sometimes you get an extra duplicate from a neighboring multiverse universe. So that's cool. In this case, you just got your pan back. Unsettling, I think is the word, It's the only thing that's happened to me that's weird, besides, a weird episode of Stargate appearing from nowhere. Never saw it before, and then tennis balls vanish. Nothing too crazy. No alien abductions or space-time anomalies into deep space or something. Well, then I would die, so hopefully that doesn't happen. If a space-time anomaly happens, I hope it's concentrated and transports me somewhere else on Earth. Please, not inside the Earth. Case notes for file 1161. The Sixth Sense. To feel his pain, to be so connected. Well, one layer of that is empathy, not just sympathy, caring for your father, but truly your mind, and in this case, your soul was tethered to your father, in ways we currently cannot describe with the scientific method, but as real as electromagnetism or gravity or any other force, or rather in this case, a manifestation of forces. It's all part of the natural world and happens to people all the time, if you're open to it. If you haven't shut off that access ramp to your subconscious, between your subconscious. I think many people have, without necessarily realizing that they did. Anyways, I'm glad your father is fit as a fiddle. I hope he remains that way for a long time. And now time for the quote of the day. Health food makes me sick. Calvin Trillin. Yes, it's difficult to find health food that is particularly delicious. For me, there is one that's just incredibly delicious, and that's avocado sushi. You make the rice in the rice cooker, mix it with rice vinegar, and then you just assemble it on a nori wrap, add some avocado between it. Then you roll it up and slice it up, and you want to mix a bit of Kiko soy sauce with sushi sauce. I can't say it. With sushi. With sushi sauce. There you go. My God. Anyways, you mix that together, and the sushi sauce is a bit sweeter, so it really blends well with the soy sauce, which is saltier. I think on their own, soy sauce is too salty and sushi sauce is too sweet. So you mix them together and it's perfect. Just dip that in. You can use a fork. You don't have to use chopsticks, but more appropriate to use chopsticks, I guess. Anyways, make it. It's so good. Case notes are file 1162. I was saved by my granddad from the brink of death. So a few stories ago, there was an account of a woman being saved in what she described as a great black void of nothingness, with a speck of light in the distance. An older man she didn't know, who had recently passed, was there, told her to go into the light. I wonder what effect the light signifies. In one sense, we can think of it like voluntarily restarting the game. I think it's a choice to be saved. Even quantum immortality, when it applies, I think is a choice. Like if you die in a video game, you can just choose to restart or exit, maybe return to the real world. And yes, guardian angels exist. Perhaps the fragments of loved ones or family members still lingering around. Maybe they chose the option to linger around, and it does have deleterious effects. And maybe they don't know that. These choices we make aren't always made with complete information. That's the other aspect to it. And how you framed it in your day's state reminds me of Castiel pulling Dean from the depths of hell, raised from perdition, plucked from the deep hole. Yeah, I don't think you were in hell. Maybe a type of oblivion that you can choose to exit, but it's always easier with help. Case notes are file 1163. When ghostly guests join you in bed. Isn't it wonderful how peaceful our minds get when sleeping? Or in that gently awakened state? Without knowledge otherwise, we assume the best. Anything to justify going back to sleep. There could be banging on the door, lightning strikes, tornadoes, hurricanes, dogs barking, whatever it is. I just want to sleep. Let me go back to bed. I hate having to sleep, but I love sleeping. Is anyone else like that? It's very weird. One thing I take away from stories involving ghostly pets, well, it's further evidence that they have souls. At least some of them. Perhaps some people, some animals, some things we qualify as living with sentience aren't just placeholders from the simulation, but definitely some of them are real, connected with a real soul of sentience. And it is curious to ponder, though, how deep down it goes. Do viruses have souls? Well, no. What about trees? No. What about insects? Then it starts to make you think. To what extent does it reach? I don't know for sure, but I'm starting to get weary going beyond insects. Case notes for the bonus file. Whispers from the Beyond. A tearjerker for sure. You know how they say that before death, our life flashes before our eyes? My hypothesis is that not only is it our lives that flash before us, but the lives of others we love too, including their buffered future. That flood of information stored in the subconscious, those barriers drop and it all flows in. Erratically for most, as described. Hard to make out exactly what's happening and what it all means, but one thing is clear, you're going to be a great mother. You know the other thing too? Maybe it was sort of a cosmic trade. Maybe your great-grandmother made that trade. She was dying and she could give out what little essence she had left, or maybe that would linger behind as a spirit, and use that to infuse you, so then you would be able to conceive. As an idea, a trade of some sort. Because energy can't be created or destroyed, it always just changes forms in the universe. Well, maybe it can be created. That is a different topic though, but I don't know, maybe that's not related, maybe it wasn't necessary, but for one thing is certain, she knew what was going to happen, and that you would be a great mother. So, that's beautiful. And now time for the quote of the day. It's not that I'm afraid to die, I just don't want to be there when it happens. Woody Allen. Yeah, same. I want that cloak of invisibility from Harry Potter. I think that story in Harry Potter of the Deathly Hallows. You have the wand, pure power. You have the resurrection stone, which can bring loved ones back, which is interesting, but even then they can't quite come back as they really are. I guess it can reanimate a body as they were, like a facsimile, but it can't restore the soul. And then of course, my favorite one is the invisibility cloak. And key of that is being able to hide even from death. I love life. I want to live forever. I don't know if that'll be possible. I think the soul is eternal, but I like this plane of existence, at least for a good while. I want to go out and explore the stars and see what's out there, you know? Maybe we'll have biological immortality, who knows, with AI coming into fruition now. There's going to be a lot of interesting developments, I think, within the next 20 to 50 years. I mean, even the next 5 or 10 years. There's no way to predict what's going to happen. If I can live for a good long while, thousands of years at least, I'll take it. No invisibility cloak, but just science. Case notes for file 1164. An entire road just vanished. The only thing I can think to explain this is dual quantum immortality all the way to a new universe that doesn't have a continuous path through that residential neighborhood. But that's a massive divergence from the original universe. It might not be that, and if not, I don't know. It can't be a space-time anomaly because you don't mention being in a different area. You still turned and you were in the area you're supposed to be to go home. So it wasn't just a different road. What else could it be? Maybe a perception glitch of some kind? But what could or would want to cause you some illusion of a road that continues straight forward? It's not like it was trying to kill you and the road forward was like a pit of lava or something. So I don't know what the motive would be for doing that. I know I'd have gone totally mad seeing an entire road just vanish. That would be freaky. At least you had a witness. That always helps. Case notes for file 1165. The boy who conquered physics. So I fully understand what you mean by a Pavlovian response to the sound of a door alert. I had one similar when I was working downtown as a front desk manager for an apartment building in downtown Montreal. When someone comes in, you sit up straight, you perk up, and you put your friendly face on. It's automatic. So I believe you. No way the kid left unless he left through the back door, but I'm guessing it's locked from the inside, or there would be some alert if he did. A fire escape that's broken? Only thing I can think of, I know you, the employees go in and out of there, but it seems like it wouldn't be possible for the kid to do that. And why would he? Why not just go out the front door? Why did he come back, though, alone with no parents in the morning? That's very weird. Doesn't seem like a ghost, though, interacting too easily with the material world. No EM interference causing lights to flicker, etc. Altogether, I don't know. But there are a lot of stories of very materialized kids that appear, well, entities that appear as kids. The kids with the black eyes, there were a few stories of kids just standing in the road and then not being there when the person went back to check. There was something going on with kids. Maybe not kids, but entities posing as kids for some reason. Is it nefarious? Well, I don't know if it's nefarious, if there's malice intended, but it's very creepy. So whoever is doing it, stop. Case notes of the creepy file number 95. We found Bigfoot in Alaska. You know, stories about Bigfoot don't surprise me at all. I think people have a misconception that the entire world is fully explored and we've cataloged all species of animals and creatures out there. Not even close. The world is just too massive. There's unexplored regions abound, not to mention the cave systems. If a low population of bipedal species was out there, who's to say they couldn't be living mostly in caves like we used to hundreds of thousands of years ago? Hunting and foraging the nearby forests and getting water from streams. Nothing at all that crazy, not even close. Especially not relative to the content I usually cover on this channel. Pretty mainstream almost. Funny how Bigfoot by comparison almost feels too normal. You know, this could even help to explain the missing 411 cases. They overlap so much with national forests and cave networks. It's not just hobbyist spelunkers going missing. So be careful out there, folks. Who knows what's there? And now time for the movie of the day, Shutter Island. So, Shutter Island is a 2010 movie, described as an American neo-noir psychological thriller. It's directed by Martin Scorsese, not exactly an underrated director, is he? And is based on a novel, so you know the storyline is going to be refined and detailed, and it is. It's one of Leonardo DiCaprio's best roles, in my opinion. And what I love about this movie more than anything else is the tone it's able to set. It's an ongoing mystery, starting off as a whodunit, but progressing into a multi-layered question about reality and sanity. On a second watch, I noticed all of the hints. All I can say is, if you like thrillers, watch this and pay attention. You absolutely can figure out the ending before you get there. Maybe even from the first 10 minutes, yeah. The movie respects your intelligence, so keep that in mind, but definitely watch it. Case notes for file 1166. The moon is an illusion. People legitimately witness the strangest anomalies in regards to the moon, and what fascinates me is the meta aspect of it. Almost every story I read about the moon glitching out are different from each other, so what could that mean? Everything about the moon disappearing, to moving across the sky very fast, or to seeing ripples across the surface, indeed like a distorted projection, or in this case it just appears super bright for no reason, and sort of like at dusk when there's still some light out in the sun. It honestly baffles me. I really do think the moon exists. I don't think it's an illusion, and is a standard celestial body, tides and all that. How do they work? But I can't deny something strange is going on there. Maybe the moon does exist, but for some unknown reason, the government is projecting an image of it that isn't truly what it is. That doesn't really fit with me though, because of the brightness of it, and how it appears. If it was a projection, I don't think it would work this way. You'd be able to easily determine where the projection was coming from. People would already have done that. And it wouldn't really make sense because everyone is observing it more or less the same way, usually, from any given location. Altogether, this is one of the more mysterious glitches that I narrate because I don't know. I really don't know until I go there myself, with Elon Musk's help in the 5 years. Maybe then I'll record a few glitches from the moon base. Yeah. Reminds me of Pluto Nash. As a terrible movie, but I still love it. Maybe just nostalgia, I don't know. Case notes for file 1167. The Twilight Zone of Parenthood. Right, so a universal switcheroo is possible. Hinting at this because your husband has always believed that you had two of those onesies. Or it's not a switcheroo, it's just a universal duplication. But it's also possible it's merely a duplicate in the sense that a different universe lost it. So in that universe, the onesie, you never put it on your kid. Before you even put it on, it disappeared. And your husband doesn't know anything about glitches, so his mind wouldn't even go towards that end of the spectrum of explanations. So yeah, if there was a second one, in his mind would just think it would create the explanation that you've always had too. He wouldn't even entertain the idea that it just magically appeared. I mean, there'd be no basis for thinking that way. It would be rather odd, though, if you experience quantum immortality, given you don't describe any sort of health condition. People do randomly just die, sometimes, from like brain aneurysms, but it's exceptionally rare, especially, I don't think you're much older than like middle age, 30s, 40s. So yeah, just randomly dying. I can't rule it out, but it doesn't seem likely. But it is one explanation. You're just in a different universe where you just bought two of the same onesie, which isn't that crazy. I mean, the idea of buying two if you liked it. Yeah, I could see that. So, okay, we'll keep that to the side as a explanation. But a duplication is probably much more palatable and likely. Sadly, though, we may never know exactly what happened, because there's no way to test it as far as we know. Maybe there is a different energy state as you transition between universes in the multiverse. When your soul connects to a new host body, it may have some detectable effect on the body, the matter in the body. It would make sense if it did, right? The soul is pure energy, so connecting to a new host would leave some trace. Maybe just not something we can detect yet, or even know to look for. It's like if you have a unknown substance in your blood, unless you know what that substance is, it's hard. There's so many things in the blood that it's hard to even look for. So it could be something like that. Maybe it does leave a trace, but we don't even know what to look for. But anyways, it sounds like you have a good life. You have a husband and kids. It's great. And now you have two onesies, so what more could you ask for? Case notes for file 1168. The Vanishing Act in Broad Daylight. I don't think this is a ghost or a time traveler or even aliens, as much as I wish it was the latter. I think some areas are quite simply prone to space-time anomalies. And the curious thing is, the man on his phone and the mail lady most likely took a step in front of themselves and before realizing anything had happened, maybe even miles away from where their foot should have landed. What would be really cool is if one day, I can find stories that appear to be linked. For instance, from their perspective, like if the mail lady also wrote a glitch where she was approaching the mailbox in this building, in the strip mall, and then was just like on the other side of the building, one moment to the next. And if you have those stories that link together, that would be very interesting to read, at least for me. So far, I haven't found stories that perfectly link in that way, at least unless they were like friends or roommates or family members that happened to both of them at the same time, but not like strangers that linked up. You need two people that either watch my channel or on Reddit and have the... That's the other thing to think about this is I think there's a lot of glitches happening, but most people either don't appreciate it, like in the previous story, their mind doesn't even go to the possibility of a glitch, so they're not going to go hunting for a channel that talks about them, or go on Reddit or other forums to post it. So we would never know. But I think glitches are happening all the time. It's just, they're underreported because people don't accept them as glitches, or they just don't even know that there's a place to talk about it without being, labeled as crazy. So yeah, there's definitely an underreporting problem in this environment. But as time moves on, I think less and less. And now time for the quote of the day. Some national parks have long waiting lists for camping reservations. When you have to wait a year to sleep next to a tree, something is wrong. George Carlin. Ah yes, so national parks are beautiful, and they are well maintained, but they're not really meant to just go brave the outdoors and venture out into the wilderness. They're too controlled for that. And you can argue for good reason or not, but my point is it's more like just... It's not really to go and camp, in my opinion. It's more to go and... you can drive through most of them just to experience the vistas and then move on. If you want to go camping, fishing, whatever it is, and just experience nature, but in a more relaxed way without a trillion rules, go to a forest instead, a national forest, state forest. Those are much more lax. You can just go there, camp. You can camp in the same spot for 2 weeks, I think. And then you just have to move 25 miles away from that spot and you can just keep camping. So they're effectively, free public land. Just practice leave no trace. So don't just leave garbage laying around. Don't be inconsiderate that way. Be considerate of animals in the area, and that's the best way to experience nature. Forests, not parks. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off. Case notes for file 1169. The Historic Twin Souls. Here's what I think happened for the first part. The spirit of the girl that you saw looked normal, lifelike, because she was able to pull your perception into her phase of reality, temporarily. In that place, you and her were as real to each other as you are to your friend in the normal phase of reality. I don't think your whole body was moved over, just your perception. Like sometimes we can perceive into different universes, the multiverse. The perception, it's like interfacing with your soul, not your physical body. It's just speculation. But it came to me because Sarah insists that she saw you, but you couldn't see her. So the spirit effectively took her place seamlessly from your perspective. And from hers, I mean, you were just there, probably like talking maybe in her general vicinity, but saying something weird like she didn't even ask. It was the spirit talking to you from your perspective. The soul is just a conduit. So it makes sense that it'd be an easier thing to interface with for a spirit. It's just soul to soul, skipping the middleman, so to speak. And yeah, and the other two, disappearing object phenomena, maybe that was more spirit related though. Maybe they were calling back the items instead of it just being a multiversal error, processing error. It seems to fit more, although the latter is also possible. And now time for the quote of the day. Silent gratitude isn't very much use to anyone. Gertrude Stein. If you owe thanks to someone, legitimately owe them thanks for something that they did to you, don't be shy to say it. And it's good to show acts of appreciation, so physical acts of appreciation are welcome. Indeed, physical acts speak louder than words, I would say, but words matter too. They're like the spice of life. You don't want to omit them. And it is harder for introverts like me. You don't really want to verbalize what you're feeling sometimes. I don't know if anyone else is like that. But yeah, it's important. It helps you connect with the people that matter to you and reinforces that connection. What else is more important? Case notes for file 1170. The Mutating Road. So we can describe this ordinarily as a multiverse peering event between your father and yourself. That fits, and I've used that to describe many prior cases of being in a place and that place being different than it should be, but only temporarily. But then I read a comment suggesting an alternate explanation, and it's fascinating. What if aliens can abduct us and, in real life, project a type of fake VR simulation of the world? And their simulation would be loaded into our minds based on our image history. So, given that neither you nor your father had seen the paved upgrade, only the typical gravel road that was your history with the place, that's all the aliens would have to play with to draw from, to construct the fake simulation. A very disturbing theory, but one that would fit in many cases, especially this one, since you're out alone in an isolated area. Maybe there's a few cars around, but not that many. Though I still do think multiversal peering can happen, and it may be what happened here. You just saw a different universe where they hadn't paved the road yet. Maybe because of the virus. You could see that happening without too many divergences because of the timing. And I know that multiversal peering does happen because all of these cases where things are different, they can't all be simulations from an alien abduction because many of these places are public. Aliens wouldn't be abducting people from the middle of theater or something like that. How would they? I mean, that would be some pretty advanced technology. I don't think they're at that level. Case notes for the creepy file number 96, The Blood Confession. Hey, I understand. If someone awakens me from my deep slumber, I transform into a depraved beast of pure fury, ready to burn the world to ash and cinder. I've yet to progress to full-on blood demon though. Maybe that'll come later on, as I evolve in my sleep deprivation. The blood could be explained by your biting your lips while sleeping, which sounds really annoying and painful by the way. But why you would wake up, or not really wake up, but in that half-awakened, half-asleep state, and then proclaim your desire to kill. I don't know. Maybe it was just a strange dream you were having. Possibly. Case notes for the bonus file, The Silver-Haired Sentinel. Ordinarily, I would chalk this up to yet another unknown, fast and agile beast of the wilds. We truly have no clue what's out there, waiting for us. Some friendly, some primal and animalistic. However, there is a supernatural hint given that your asthma was cured soon after this, and it was really strong asthma as you describe it. Dissipating away on its own like that is interesting. This can happen, though in medical accounts it's pretty rare. And moreover, what if these miracles, so-called miracles, are directed intervention from beings beyond us, maybe even aliens? They take shape and form occasionally because we need signs as human beings. And yes, there is a chance of it being a skinwalker too, given the Native American land and culture. But to feel no fear in its presence suggests otherwise in my opinion. I think you would have felt some fear. Just the aura of a skinwalker is very creepy, even seen from afar. And now time for the movie of the day, Armageddon. So yes, in one sense, this is the embodiment of a Michael Bay production, a summer blockbuster. Especially has that 90s vibe, which I personally love. How can I describe the 90s vibe though? Excitement mixed with grandiose plots, mixed with intense optimism of humanity and the future. I think there's no denying we're missing that in 2023, especially optimism for the future and humanity. It's a Michael Bay production, so don't think you're going to extract the grand meaning of life from this movie, 42, because you won't. Intellectually, scientifically, it's almost all hogwash. But don't let that keep you from enjoying what is here. What is the purpose of this movie isn't to be some, it's not designed around passing a high school science class. It's designed to make you care about humanity, care about each other, care about the characters on screen who act their hearts out. Billy Bob Thornton is a damn MVP in this movie, and Bruce Willis too. I will tell you something else, and I don't know how else to sing a movie's praise more than this. I've seen this movie at least 5 times in my life now, and every time, even though I know exactly what will happen, I know the scenes, I know the mechanical sense of the scenes, the words are going to say and everything. Even though I know that, I cry like a baby multiple times. I'm unashamed of this fact. It hurts me hard in the feels. And that's saying something, because I'm pretty stoic otherwise. Here's a quote of the movie that really, I quite enjoyed. Hey guys, remember, we're heroes now. So that incident with me and the gun on the asteroid, let's keep that under wraps, alright? Steve Buscemi. And yeah, of course, Steve Buscemi. What movie isn't good with him in it? And the acting force and power in this movie is off the charts. You have so many: Bruce Willis, Billy Bob Thornton, Steve Buscemi, Peter Stormare. You have there's Ben Affleck too, and just endless. Anyways, you see that quote that I just mentioned? This is a great humorous line, especially with Steve Buscemi's delivery. And the guy is a damn national treasure, as we talked about. But this is also a significant difference between 90s movies and movies today, where movies today are almost like 80% humor or more. But back then, humor is seen as more of an important critical spice, not the main course itself. So you'd establish a serious tone and a strong core plot, even if it doesn't make sense technically speaking. It's still coherent in the story it's trying to tell. And then you had humor that was just sprinkled on top to help ease the tension. It's like you're having a dish that's really spicy, and that's great, that's exciting, that's fun. But then you also want to have a bit of bread and milk on the side just so to tone it down when you need it, and that's what the humor delivers. Perfectly balanced, in my opinion. That is my review of Armageddon, and I highly encourage you to watch it if you haven't already. Seriously. Or even if you've already seen it, you just rewatch it, because it's probably been a while, and you're gonna cry like I did. Well, if you don't cry to this movie, I don't know. Something's off. Case notes for file 1171. The checkmark of mystery. So a full classroom-style gaslighting prank gone too far? Let's say I'll keep that explanation as a small possibility on the far corner of the table, but I don't think it's that. There are 2 glitch explanations that pop to mind here. The first is the real player controlling us via our soul, controlling you in this case, the us in the real world, took control of your body momentarily and did in fact walk over and bonk that girl for no discernible reason. The other explanation is the whole classroom was affected by multiversal peering. This explanation excites me most because it would be my first account reading a story where multiversal peering affected dozens of people simultaneously in the same place, but with the caveat of one person, you, not being affected. Which would tell me that it's not related to space-time warping or anything like that. The geometry of that wouldn't fit if everyone else was affected. Unless some people are immune to it, that's an interesting angle too. Maybe some people are immune to multiversal peering. Whatever causes it, some people's souls doesn't make that connection, I guess. But maybe it's just related to direct interfacing with people's minds and souls. Whatever triggered it left you out. Or again, maybe you are immune to it. That's very interesting though, the immunity theory. But the how and why this is happening is the real mystery, and I can't say to that. Case notes for the bonus file. See her Ross and the ethereal evidence. Honestly, tell this story to any normal person, and they would do their best to try and discount it as impossible. But why? The evidence is there. I mean, again, unless the person is lying, which is possible. In all these stories I read, maybe people are just making it up. I can't tell you that, really. I give people the benefit of the doubt. And I think in the grand scheme of things, most stories I read are true. True accounts, at least, to say. It really did happen to the person. Now, there's all perception issues and stuff like that, but in this case, there's not really much to perceive. The person was there, felt a presence, said, if there's someone there, let it be known, and instantly this happened. The CD player stopped playing. How else do you describe that? Is it just coincidence? I mean, the odds of that are astronomical. To me, this shows how awesome the universe is. It's not something to explain away and just try to deny. That there's mystery and unobservable phenomena that stretch past our current level of scientific understanding is so cool. Who wants to have everything known? That's boring. And this is true even within mainstream academic thought too. For instance, dark matter and dark energy. They describe forces and effects in the universe that are observed everywhere, but we have no theory as to their existence or what they truly are. Dark energy is the force that's expanding the universe and pushing everything apart, even though gravity should be pulling it together. We don't know why that happens, it just happens. And then dark matter is that the amount of gravity that we calculate given the mass of a galaxy doesn't explain how the galaxy stays together. It doesn't have enough gravity to hold itself apart given how fast it's rotating. All the mass is rotating. So given that, there's postulated to be a lot of mass that we can't interact, non-interacting mass. But we don't know what that is. That's why we just call it dark matter and move on. But we have no clue. So those are two genuine scientific mysteries in the mainstream. Who's to say there's not more? Maybe this happens all the time. Spirits are around. They don't always make their presence known. But that doesn't mean that they're not there. We literally have dark matter, which is just a bunch of mass that we know is there because of gravity, but we don't know anything else about it. So spirits aren't a great stretch, really, from that. So yeah, it's energy affecting our environment. Even if we can't say how or what kind yet, that's fine. I think one day we will. In the meanwhile, let's just enjoy the ethereal ride. Case notes for the bonus file. The legacy of a ghostly director. The prior lighting director wanted you both to know that she was around. What other way is there to interface with electronics? Flickering lights, the phone ringing. We see this reproduced time and time again, and it's all down to the soul interfacing that connects with us. Even fully alive humans often affect electronic fields accidentally, but then as a spirit, flickering lights are controllable, as this proves in many other occasions. And then, with the phone call, obviously there's no way to transmit her voice through the phone. Even if you can control electronics, you have this ability to just approach it and make a light flicker. You can't code your voice in binary with that ability. I mean, maybe you could with like a trillion years of practice, but no. All she could do is make the phone ring, and then there's just static, random excitations in the phone line. But this isn't even the realm of supernatural for me. It's just describing a normal day. A normal human passed away, a good person, by the sounds of it, and part of their energy, if you don't want to use the word soul, remained behind. Nothing to fear. I remember that account of a demonologist that travels the country. He himself said that there really isn't much to fear in the supernatural realm. If there's God, the Christian God, I don't know what kind of God it would be. Even if that is the actual higher level, and who's to say there isn't not a level even above that, above heaven or God. I don't know. But I do know that even this demonologist that's seen some crazy stuff says there's really not much to fear. It's more the unknown, but as you experience it, it's normal. Demonic possession aside, because that's so incredibly rare, but that is pretty twisted. I don't want to be around someone who's actually possessed, like a real possession. But outside of that, nothing to fear. And now time for the quote of the day. There must be more to life than having everything. Maurice Sendak. Yeah, so a little minimalist cheer here. What can I say to this more than having stuff is good, just be sure that that stuff isn't your life. I think experiences and people are more important. than just having stuff, and especially stuff that you don't even use. Declutter your life. It's one of the best pieces of advice I can give to someone is just declutter your life. If you don't want to throw things away, that's fine. I highly recommend that people who have a lot of stuff that they don't really use, just get a storage unit. Yeah, you're spending a bit of money, but then just move it all there. You still have it, it's yours. And in a decade, if there's something you need from it, it'll still be there. But then it's not cluttering your environment, which you're always inhabiting. Clutter in your environment places a heavy weight on your soul. This is something I've known for a long time. So declutter your life and you'll feel so much better. Case notes are file 1172. A scream so powerful, it cracked the universe. So right, a lady in a white dress. She's seen all over the place. One where she was randomly crossing a freeway, still barefoot too. Even tried to open the car door in that story. And then she's just gone. In folklore, that scream is tethered towards the passing of a loved one. Maybe it doesn't have to be a blood relative though. Perhaps a friend? Maybe this is all related to banshees. And maybe banshees don't look disfigured and horrific like monsters. Maybe they look like ladies in a white dress. Maybe they're spirits that lingered behind and have since gone insane in a certain sense, especially when they detect death. My guess, someone in your neighborhood died and that's why the scream erupted, and then again the second time it happened. Depending on the range of this detection radius of the banshee, because of course people are dying all the time, it's kind of crazy how many people die per year. Something like 60 million people globally die every single year. That's 2 every single second. That's a lot of people. So obviously, banshees aren't screaming every single second of the day, so there's a limited range in which they detect it, if this theory is true. Case file number 1173. The Unreal Human Darkness. Many accounts of certain areas in the world having clouds of darkness around them, but I think this is the first time I've heard of a human being surrounded by a visible black aura. I think our actions in life play a role in defining the attributes of our soul. Good and bad are objective in my view. It's like in K-Pax, where Prod effectively says that everyone in the universe knows right from wrong. Is it objective, like woven into the fabric of the universe? Well, maybe, by a god or some being higher than I don't know. But I do know everyone knows what it is. Don't harm others, be honest, don't steal, that kind of stuff. So if you constantly go against the grain of what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to behave, I think it does affect your soul, and maybe even to the point of altering the color that others can see. Maybe it was so potent in this case that it just couldn't be contained. It's almost like a feedback loop that isn't felt by the abuser, but it does affect their soul. And maybe if you're so evil as a human, a certain threshold point crosses and your soul can't contain its own energy anymore. And there are bleed-through events like this where it leaks out. It's crazy. Case notes are file 1174. The eerie synchronicity of 2 family tragedies. Wow, so a guardian angel event this was, but it makes me wonder, what if the entities that oversee and protect us don't have magical powers that come from nowhere? Free, that is to say. What if it's always a trade-off? To save someone from a bullet, and per some cosmic rule, someone else has to be shot. There's a trade. You can't just save someone and then nothing else happens in the universe. Protection comes at a cost, apparently. Case notes for the creepy file number 97, The Mysterious Watcher. So yeah, like 2 stories ago, some men are just out there and they're evil. Make no mistake about it. It's not ethereal demons we have to fear, it's mankind. Some people. A very small segment of them. I'm a positive person. I like to keep reality in perspective. The amount of sociopaths out there who willingly choose to harm others is an extremely small fraction of the total population. So try not to live in fear. But do take basic precautions, so if the worst does happen, you'll be safe. Or in this case, just have blinds on your windows. That's just a basic privacy thing. I mean, maybe if you live in the middle of nowhere, but even then, it's a good idea to have blinds. Especially for me, I have to block out the evil sun. It comes down to that old adage of hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Very wise. And now time for the quote of the day. I haven't spoken to my wife in years. I didn't want to interrupt her. Rodney Dangerfield. I like his name, perfectly suits this quote. He's in extreme danger. Girls do seem to really like talking, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just found this quote to be rather humorous. Nothing wrong with a bit of comedy, right? Case notes are file 1175, The Moonlit Time Heist. There are two ordinary explanations that popped into my mind that I'd like to brush aside because I don't think they actually fit. The first is narcolepsy or microsleep, conditions where one involuntarily falls asleep for brief periods of time, often without any perception of having fallen asleep. If the story was about a single person, just you driving alone, maybe. But 3? Impossible for this to happen to 3 people unless it was an induced memory loss from some external force or being. So yeah, aliens are a possibility, but I don't think this is some natural phenomena of just people having narcolepsy, 3 of them at the same exact time. No way. The second is quantum immortality. It can't be a new universe, because that doesn't explain the time loss. All universes in the multiverse are running concurrently. In other words, the same clock ticks for all of them, with exceptions of variants within personal reference frames, but nothing would shift time in another universe on Earth by any measurable amount, unless like a black hole entered the solar system and that only in one universe. So all we're left here is, in my opinion, is alien abduction, a trio. Or a space-time warp? But my guess is aliens. Space-time anomalies don't affect electronics, at least as far as any story I've heard. But aliens do. Their technology interferes with our electronic processes. Case notes of file 1176, The Thunderbird Sighting. So I had to look up what a thunderbird referred to, never heard before. North American indigenous peoples' lore and cultural roots, emanating from northeastern populations, creating thunder by flapping its wings and lightning by flapping its eyes. Pretty cool. I'm not sure about lightning, but I could see a type of bird flapping its wings fast enough to break the sound barrier, causing the loud boom effect. I think whatever your mom saw and others was very real. There's so much out there on our little blue dot that we have yet to discover, and plenty of species of animals that may be really rare and try to avoid humans. I mean, if you think about it, if it's a bird that can fly, it'd be pretty easy to avoid detection by humans. Maybe there are some species of birds like the thunderbird that simply don't like to interact with humans or be near them. Plenty of animals are afraid of humans and avoid contact. If you can fly, well, you can avoid almost any contact. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if giant birds like this exist, but at a small population level, I would say. Not many of them. Notes for the bonus file, The Dark Secrets of Clinton Road. So something was causing car headlights to go out, bursted open or just electronically disabled. Could be spirits in the area, trying to make their presence felt in a way that couldn't be attributed to random chance. Especially given that it's always a left light that goes out on these cars. Seems like the spirits are trying to communicate a message, but I'm not sure what left could be referring to in this context. Related to Clinton Road? Turn left? Maybe they mean to say run, go away, you're not welcome here? I could see that. Spirits could be territorial too. And now time for the quote of the day. Civilization is the process of reducing the infinite to the finite. Oliver Wendell Holmes. This is a quote that sits with you and makes you maybe more easily boil down to battling against entropy. Everything wants to spread out and reduce order, and we constantly try to increase order, mold the universe to our doing and our use. But the thing is, no matter what we do, we increase entropy in the grand scale of the universe, but we can locally reduce it. It's kind of like an air conditioner where you can reduce the temperature in your home, but it'll increase the temperature outside. The total energy entropy increases, the disorder. But that's okay, because the universe is so massive, we don't really have to worry about there being too much disorder out there. As long as we control our environment, we're okay. So, I mean, civilization is pretty cool like that. And technology? If you haven't noticed, I like technology. And like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony, signing off.